I'm a 29-year-old woman who recently received a call from my mother, someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 5 years. She reached out because my sister, Melissa, 27, and her husband, who was supposed to be my husband originally, had just gone through a tragedy. To give some background, my sister Melissa hooked up with my fiancé Lucas on the day of our engagement. Lucas and I had been together since college, and he proposed after almost 5 years of dating. He threw a surprise party for us on the night of our engagement, and I was thrilled until around 1 a.m. when I went into the backyard for better reception and caught my sister and Lucas passionately making out. I was shocked and hurt, feeling like my world had crumbled. They didn't notice me at first, but when they did, it was too late. I fled to a nearby hotel, hyperventilating and trying to process what I had seen. Then Melissa texted me, confessing her love for Lucas and admitting this had been going on for a long time. Later, Lucas texted me saying he proposed to me to try and forget Melissa. But it didn't work. He claimed it wasn't about me, it was about him and Melissa being meant for each other. He saw me as a placeholder to finally be with her. I stayed at the hotel for a couple of days, trying to pull myself together, feeling like life was playing a cruel joke on me. After nearly 4 days away, I returned home to collect my things and resume work to avoid getting fired. When I arrived, I discovered that my family had been living with Lucas, waiting for my return. It might have seemed touching under different circumstances, but I had left abruptly, ignoring everyone's attempts to reach out. When I finally showed up, chaos ensued. Everyone rushed to hug me and express relief at my return, even Melissa. She hugged me tearfully, but I was too stunned to react. Eventually, when things calmed down, I announced that I was back only to gather my belongings and leave for good. Lucas had been silent until then, but when I said I was leaving, he mentioned he had already packed and was moving in with Melissa. My family, my parents, aunt, and dad's sister, all smiled widely, despite the situation not being joyful for me. Melissa stood by Lucas, looking sad but still smiling. I couldn't hold back and demanded to know why they were all smiling. As far as I was concerned, Melissa had broken off my engagement and taken my boyfriend of almost 5 years. There was nothing funny or sweet about it. My mother spoke up, explaining they couldn't change the past but could accept the future. They believed Melissa and Lucas belonged together, even if their relationship started from cheating. They were sorry but felt this was for the best. Melissa apologized for falling in love with my boyfriend and wished she could have told me sooner. She acknowledged it was a painful way for me to find out. But they claimed to be deeply in love and committed to each other. Then, right in front of me, they kissed, and my mother even wiped a tear from her eye. I couldn't contain myself and told them their behavior was disgusting, not sentimental or emotional. To my surprise, my family seemed annoyed with me, saying I was being bratty and selfish. They thought I should be happy for my sister instead of making it all about myself. I was shocked by their reaction and demanded they leave my house immediately. I couldn't understand how they could defend Melissa and Lucas while painting me as the bad guy. My father intervened, telling me not to act like a child and to accept that these things happen. He wanted me to celebrate my sister finding her soulmate instead of being jealous. I couldn't handle their attitude, so I packed some things and left without waiting to hear them out. They called after me, but I felt they cared more about Melissa's happiness than mine or what was right. They were so focused on justifying Melissa's actions that they forgot about my feelings. After that, my family tried to reach out several times, but I never responded. I didn't feel like I owed them anything after how they treated me. A couple of weeks later, I received an invitation to Melissa and Lucas's wedding, which I declined. Many of our mutual friends also declined the invitation in support of me. Some relatives who knew the truth also distanced themselves from my family after seeing how they treated me. It's been 5 years now, and I've essentially cut my family out of my life completely. They occasionally try to reconnect, sending well wishes on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignore them. I didn't block them, but I removed them from my followers and friends list on social media. I wanted them to see that I was living a great life and maybe feel jealous. It was petty, but it felt like the least I could do after everything they put me through. Until recently, I had no idea what they had been doing in the past few years. Then, about 4 days ago, my mother called me from an unfamiliar number. I almost hung up immediately, but she sounded desperate, so I reluctantly agreed to talk for a couple of minutes. My sense of humanity wouldn't let me turn my back on her completely. When my mother called, she explained that Melissa and Lucas had started a business a couple of years ago, but it was failing badly. Their investors were pulling out because the business wasn't making any profit. Despite borrowing more money, their situation worsened, and now they were deep in debt with loan sharks after them. They were being hounded by employees, investors, and lenders. My mother, aware of my comfortable lifestyle, saw me as a last resort to help them out. She begged me to loan them money, specifically nearly $75,000, to pay off their debts. I asked why Melissa wasn't reaching out herself. My mother explained that Melissa and Lucas have forbidden her from approaching me directly because of what happened 5 years ago. Melissa wasn't ready to accept help from me. For months, my parents and even Lucas's family have been supporting them as much as possible, but it wasn't enough. Both families were retired and needed to support themselves too. My mother felt she had no other option but to ask me for help. I could afford to assist them, but I didn't want to. Melissa had chosen not to contact me for help, and I believed they had lost any right to make demands from me. The day they cheated on me, I told my mother that I couldn't and wouldn't help them, even if I could. My mother sounded upset and said I was being cruel, urging me to think about our family. I pointed out that Melissa and Lucas didn't consider me when they had their affair, and my family didn't think about me when they supported them. So I didn't feel obligated to help them now. I've worked hard to achieve where I am today, and I'm not going to just give $75,000 to two people who don't deserve it. My mother started crying on the phone, calling me selfish and warning that my sister and her husband would face serious trouble if I didn't help. I told her I couldn't help them and hung up. Since then, my mother has been bombarding me with texts every hour, pleading for me to reconsider and think about my sister. She insists this isn't the time for revenge and that I'll regret not helping in the future. I feel torn and unsure of what to say. I don't want to be seen as the bad guy, but I also don't want to help them after what they did. Am I the asshole for refusing to financially help my sister after she stole my fiancé 5 years ago? Update 1. I finally decided to block my family. I kept them around earlier because I wanted them to see my life and maybe feel jealous. I also thought cutting them off completely might be a regret if something bad happened to them, but now I don't care. I should have cut them off 5 years ago. I don't know why I kept them around for so long. Refusing to help my sister now isn't petty. It's just the sensible thing to do. They've already wasted a lot of money, and I doubt they can repay me even if I give them $75,000. While I'm well off, I can't just drop that kind of money without expecting it back. Even if they were close friends, I'd expect repayment. But Melissa and Lucas are neither close to me nor capable of paying me back, so there's no reason for me to help them. I talked to a couple of friends about this, and they agreed that I did the right thing by refusing to give them money, not out of revenge, but because it's impractical and unrealistic to expect me to help after they betrayed me in the past. Blocking my mother means she can't guilt-trip me anymore, so I feel relieved and have nothing to worry about. Update 2. Something major happened today. I was at work when my neighbor called, saying there was a couple outside my house screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor thought they seemed unstable and had been causing a scene for about an hour. I asked for a description, and deep down, I knew it was Melissa and Lucas. I rushed home immediately because I couldn't risk them getting inside. Luckily, I arrived in about 15 minutes and caught them trying to pick the lock on my door. I confronted them, asking what they were doing. I tried to call the police, but Lucas knocked the phone from my hand before I could. Melissa told me they were just here to talk and didn't want anything from me. Well, not right now, at least. I agreed to talk but insisted it be outside in the yard. I didn't feel comfortable inviting them into my home given the tension. They agreed, which was a relief. Melissa started explaining that my mother had informed her about my phone call and how I had ignored subsequent texts and blocked them all. He told me my behavior was unfair and that I should have moved on by now, 5 years later. He'd accused me of seeking attention from my family with dramatic acts. Melissa said she felt insulted by my refusal to help them and came to discuss it. She mentioned that while she managed to gather money this time by selling their house and jewelry, she might need more in the future. She needed to rely on me for that support. I bluntly told her she couldn't count on me under any circumstances because I despised her and her husband. I was furious and expressed how much I hated them. I was so angry that I mentioned it took a lot of effort not to hit her. Then Lucas insisted I sign a document promising future financial support. I refused, knowing it wouldn't be valid if I was coerced into signing it. I told them both to leave, but Melissa pushed me, saying I owed it to them as family and couldn't run from my responsibilities. I was shocked by her actions and nearly resorted to violence. Instead, I grabbed my phone, which had fallen, and ran to my car. I sped off without looking back. They stayed at my house as I drove away, which was unfortunate for them, but I didn't stop to check. I decided to call the police and report what happened. When I returned home, the police had already arrived within 20 minutes. I explained everything, and they arrested Melissa and Lucas. I knew the charges might not be severe, but it was worth it to have them removed from my life. It's been a couple of hours since then, and I haven't heard from anyone in my family. I expected someone to reach out by now, even from different numbers. But there's been nothing. I'm guessing they're either done with the situation and won't bother me again, or they're waiting for things to calm down before trying to contact me. Update 3. Hi everyone, so it's been about a week since my last update. I had started to think that my family might leave me alone after I called the police on Melissa and Lucas. But unfortunately, I was wrong. Just yesterday, my parents showed up at my house, asking if they could talk to me. They seemed more humble and less arrogant than Melissa and Lucas, so I allowed them in. My mother started crying as soon as she entered and apologized for ever taking Melissa's side over mine. My father explained that after hearing about Melissa and Lucas's arrest and their behavior towards me, they couldn't see them the same way. They decided to cut them off. My mother continued crying while my father expressed regret for not supporting me when I was the victim. While I appreciated my parents finally coming to their senses, I explained that it was too little, too late for things to improve. I had become accustomed to living life on my own terms and didn't want to prioritize my family over myself anymore. Despite their visit and apology, I couldn't promise to work on rebuilding our relationship because I didn't see the point in salvaging something that felt irreparably damaged, even if it was with my parents. They protested a bit, suggesting we could fix things if we wanted to, but my reluctance was clear. I no longer wanted to try. I expressed my respect for their efforts, but reiterated that I was done with the relationship. They seemed disappointed but eventually left, asking if I could at least unblock them to stay in touch. I've unblocked my parents, which feels odd, but I've made my decision.
My name is Adam Harrison, and I'm about to turn 46 this year. I work in sales at the U.S. branch of a French electronics manufacturer. I've always enjoyed leveraging my French language skills, which I excelled in during my student days. It's fulfilling work. When I was younger, I spent about 3 years posted at the company's headquarters in France, and I've returned several times for training and business trips. Despite leading a busy life, I never made time for romance, and I remained single even after turning 45. However, fate had other plans for me last year. On my way back from visiting a client, as I walked down the main street in front of the office, a large man in front of me suddenly collapsed in pain, clutching his stomach. I rushed to his side and asked if he was okay, but he seemed to not understand my words. Speaking to him in French, he explained that his chest hurt and asked me to call an ambulance. I dialed 911 on my mobile phone, and while I was on the call, a sophisticated woman in her 60s approached us, asking what was happening. I explained that the man spoke only French and was having chest pains. She identified herself as a nurse and took charge, asking the man about his pain and checking his pulse. When the ambulance arrived, she relayed detailed information about the man's condition to the paramedics and accompanied him. I was impressed by how efficiently she handled the situation. I later encountered her again when my father, who lived alone, was hospitalized for colon surgery. She happened to be the nurse assigned to my father's room. "Oh, you're the one from the other day. What a coincidence. Thank you again for your help," I said gratefully. "Same here. Is that man all right now?" "Yes, thanks to you calling the ambulance quickly," I replied with a smile. "You're very good at French," she noted. "Not really. I'm self-taught. I've always been interested in French because I enjoy watching French movies and TV dramas. I learned by watching French language programs on YouTube and buying books." "That's wonderful. It seems you can speak French too." "I work for the U.S. branch of a French company, so I can speak a little." "Have you been to France?" she asked. "Yes, I have," I replied. She had also been to France on a trip. From then on, whenever we saw each other, we started talking more. Her name was Susan Miller, and she was almost 60 years old. She had a bright personality and a beautiful smile, and talking to her was always enjoyable. I had always wanted to talk more with Susan. Looking back, I realized I had fallen for her at first sight. The age difference didn't matter to me. She was incredibly attractive. Through our conversations, I learned she was divorced and currently single, with her daughter already married and living on her own. I felt it wouldn't be a problem to ask her out. On the day my father was discharged from the hospital, I mustered the courage and asked Susan for her contact information. She happily agreed, and we exchanged details. Once home, I wasted no time and invited her out to dinner. Since then, we've enjoyed several dinners and movie outings together. The more I got to know her, the more I was drawn to her charms. Susan was kind, caring, always cheerful and positive. Talking to her healed and energized me, even when work left me tired or troubled. About 6 months into dating, I proposed to her. "Susan, will you marry me?" I asked as I showed her the ring I had prepared. She teared up and asked, "Are you sure you're okay with someone much older like me?" Age didn't matter to me. I wanted her. "I can't imagine being with anyone else. I want to spend the rest of my life with you," I reassured her, holding her hand. With tears of joy, she replied, "Thank you. I want to live my life with you too, honey." My proposal was successful. Susan didn't want a wedding ceremony, but when she turned 60 and retired from nursing, we took a 2-week honeymoon to Bordeaux and Paris in France. It was a lavish trip to celebrate her 60th birthday and retirement. We stayed in luxury hotels and dined at 3-star restaurants. Having saved quite a bit since being single until 45 and without any particular hobbies, it felt like a perfect way to start our new life together. Therefore, I could afford that extravagant trip. Susan was delighted, and seeing her frolic like a young girl made me glad we went. One morning, about half a year into our married life, I was called by my boss just as I was about to head to work. "The president of an important client at our headquarters in France is coming to the US with his wife. We're hosting a dinner party, and I'd like you to attend with your wife," my boss Ryan said, specifying the date. "I'll let you know the place once it's decided." "Understood," I replied, noting it down. Suddenly, Ryan laughed. "To think you'd have a wife, huh? I thought you'd never get married. Good for you, finding someone with peculiar taste." His scornful gaze met mine. Ryan wasn't around the same age as me, but he always boasted about his much younger and beautiful wife. He constantly belittled me, suggesting I must be lonely being single at my age, or that no woman with peculiar tastes would marry someone like me. To still hear such things even after getting married irked me, but I kept silent. I worried about exposing Susan to potential unpleasant comments from such a boss, but it was an order, so I had no choice. The day of the dinner party arrived. I took Susan to the specified restaurant, an upscale steakhouse. After saying the name of the person who made the reservation, we were guided to a private room where Ryan and his wife were waiting. True to Ryan's boasting, his wife was indeed a slender beauty like a model. "Thank you for your patience, Ryan," I greeted him. Ryan looked at Susan, who was standing behind me, and said, "Adam, why did you bring your mother? You promised to bring your wife, didn't you?" Hearing those words, anger rushed to my head. He had a malicious smile on his lips, probably knowing full well what he was saying. That level of harassment was almost impressive. "She's not my mother. Let me introduce you. This is my wife, Susan," I said firmly. Susan offered a forced smile, but I could tell she was hurting inside. I couldn't forgive Ryan for insulting her. I decided then that if he made another disrespectful remark, I would not hold back my response. Soon after, our client Lewis arrived with a young employee guiding him. "Nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Lewis. Excuse me, but my wife Emma is in the restroom. I'll introduce her later," he said in French. Ryan, his wife, Susan, and I all introduced ourselves in French. Ryan's wife appeared uncomfortable, not being fluent in French and barely speaking beyond stating her name. relying on Ryan to answer any questions from Lewis. In contrast, my wife Susan was so fluent in French that she could engage in a lively conversation with Lewis. This seemed to irritate Ryan and his wife. Anyway, Adam, I'm surprised you decided to marry someone so much older, Ryan suddenly remarked in English. No matter how well she speaks French, why would you choose someone who looks so mature? Everyone knows younger is better. Or do you have a thing for mature women? How old is your wife anyway? He was incredibly rude. Susan looks her age but possesses a beauty that comes with years. Her wonderful personality was why I fell for her. Being ridiculed with such shallow words felt like a total dismissal of my love for Susan. Excuse me, that's incredibly disrespectful, I retorted, my fists clenched in anger. What? You're talking back to your boss? Ryan smirked, clearly enjoying the moment. Not understanding the English exchange, Lewis looked confused. There are things you don't say, no matter if you're my boss, I continued firmly. It's okay. You don't have to defend me. I knew what I was signing up for when I married you, Susan whispered, pulling on my sleeve. Just then, the private room's door opened, and a woman entered, guided by a staff member. Emma, over here. Everyone, let me introduce you to my wife, Emma, Lewis announced, standing up. Emma was an elegant woman around 60 years old. She glared at Ryan and began to speak fluent English. I heard your conversation. I am very displeased. Apologize to them right now, Emma demanded. Ryan was speechless, caught off guard by her firm tone. I'm sorry, he stammered. Not to me. Apologize to them. Emma insisted, her anger unabated. Turning to us, Ryan apologized. Adam and Susan, I'm terribly sorry for my rude comments. Please forgive me. Emma explained the situation to Lewis in French. Then, turning back to us, she said, What an incredibly rude thing to say. I refuse to dine with someone who speaks so thoughtlessly. I'm leaving. It was Emma who calmed down Lewis, who was still fuming with anger. Ryan quietly left with his wife. That's when we properly introduced ourselves to Emma. Nice to meet you. I'm Susan, Adam's wife, Susan recounted. Hearing Susan introduce herself, Emma's eyes widened. Susan? Are you Susan Miller? Yes, I am, Susan confirmed. Oh my goodness. I'm Emma Anderson, your pen pal. Emma exclaimed excitedly, switching to French to continue. Really? You're that Emma? Susan looked equally surprised. They held hands, rejoicing over this serendipitous meeting. Listening to their story, it turned out they had met on an online forum and had been exchanging emails for over 20 years. Susan taught Emma English, and Emma taught Susan French. That explained why Emma spoke English. Susan was shy, so they had never video called before. That's why they didn't recognize each other's faces. What a coincidence! To meet a pen pal from overseas like this, Susan marveled. The dinner went well with Emma and Susan's conversation taking center stage. The food was delicious, and Lewis and Emma enjoyed it too. That was really fun. I can't forgive Ryan's remarks, but I'm truly happy Emma and Susan met by chance, I reflected. Lewis had heard about Emma's longtime pen pal before. I'm very satisfied. Having enjoyed the local cuisine, I'll mention this to our headquarters in France, Lewis said after the meal. The couple left, and the reception seemed to have been a success. That night at home, Susan said to me, Adam, thank you for standing up to Ryan earlier. I acted tough, but if you had agreed with him, I would have been deeply hurt. I was relieved and happy you spoke up for me. Of course I would. No matter who he is, I can't allow anyone to speak ill of my dear Susan. But you mentioned you had prepared yourself for this when we got married. I didn't know you felt that way. It was a bit of a shock. Well, we do have a 14-year age difference. I don't look young, and the age gap is quite obvious, isn't it? I was ready for people to say things, but it was good that your parents agreed to our marriage without any objection. My goodness, that you needed such preparation to marry me. Again, thank you for marrying me, Susan. "That's nothing compared to the happiness of being with you," she said, smiling warmly. Seeing her smile, I felt even more affection for her. A few days after Louis returned to France, I received news that a major deal with his company had been finalized. He had insisted on sending his regards to me. It seems Louis also reported Ryan's inappropriate comments to our headquarters, resulting in him being demoted to a regular employee. I was promoted to manager in his place, reversing our positions. Since that day, he has never looked down on me again. He became quite subdued, showing respect towards me, which was satisfying. Susan and Emma continued their friendship through emails and calls. Susan is now planning a trip to Lyon, where Emma lives. Seeing Susan excitedly talk about it, I wanted to continue to protect her smile. I want to make her happy, that's what I thought. My husband's family and I have a complicated history, especially with my mother-in-law. To provide some context, my husband Kyle is the younger of 2 children in his family and has always been viewed as the favored child, despite having an older sister. My mother-in-law, Monica, is a clinical narcissist who always made everything about herself. She would even demand gifts on birthdays, claiming her children wouldn't exist without her. Kyle has shared with me that growing up, his achievements were always overshadowed by his mother's need for attention. Initially, when I began dating Kyle and visiting their home, my mother-in-law seemed pleasant enough, but her behavior deteriorated as our relationship grew more serious. Over the years, she became increasingly difficult, especially after we decided to marry 3 years ago. Planning our wedding became a nightmare because of my mother-in-law interference. Thankfully, Kyle and I had agreed early on to finance the wedding ourselves to prevent family members from taking over. When my mother-in-law tried to change our wedding plans, suggesting alterations to the venue layout, I politely declined her ideas. She complained to Kyle, who tried to mediate and find a compromise, but I insisted that our decisions were final. For our wedding, I envisioned a casual, non-religious celebration with a mismatched bridal party featuring a loose color palette. The only thing I had requested from my mother-in-law and the rest of my bridesmaids was to choose a dress within our color palette and show it to me before purchasing. My mother and the other bridesmaids complied, showing me their choices without issue. However, my mother-in-law never showed me any options despite my repeated requests leading up to the wedding. On the day of the event, to everyone's shock, my mother-in-law arrived wearing an off-white dress, a medium-length outfit with a transparent chiffon layer and a bolero. She looked smugly triumphant as she noticed my reaction, which left me in tears. Immediately, my husband intervened and asked her to change or leave. Unfortunately, my father-in-law didn't want to drive her back and ended up arguing with my husband. Eventually, to keep the peace, I reluctantly allowed my mother-in-law to stay in her dress. The situation was incredibly embarrassing for our guests, who were clearly surprised by her attire. Throughout the wedding, I ignored her completely and didn't exchange a single word. My husband, aware of my distress, urged me to let it go, reminding me that no matter what, I was the bride. However, his lack of understanding regarding the inappropriateness of his mother's choice upset me deeply. I eventually forgave her, although she never apologized for her actions. Her narcissism didn't stop there. When we were trying to conceive, it was a challenging time for us, especially after experiencing a miscarriage. Naturally, I was quite nervous when I found out I was pregnant again. Kyle was thrilled about becoming a dad and supported me throughout, attending every doctor's appointment, reading parenting books together, and even setting up a lovely nursery for our baby-to-be. 2 months later, we felt ready to share our exciting news with our families and close friends. We wanted to ensure we passed the critical first trimester before spreading the joy. We hosted a lunch gathering, inviting our parents, close family, and friends. As they noticed my growing stomach, their expressions shifted to joy and amazement. My mother teared up with happiness when she confirmed my pregnancy and understood why we had kept it private. She was thrilled about becoming a grandmother. However, Kyle's mother, Monica, had a starkly different reaction. Instead of sharing in the joy, she responded angrily upon learning that we had kept the pregnancy a secret. She felt left out and accused me of intentionally excluding her, disregarding our reasons for waiting to share the news. Despite my efforts to explain our reasons, Monica remained visibly upset and refused further engagement with me. Her disapproval overshadowed what should have been a joyful occasion. Throughout the evening, she ignored me and displayed disrespect not only towards me but also towards my mother, who had always been kind to her in the past. Monica remained withdrawn, buried in her phone during conversations while everyone else engaged in the family gathering. It was clear she was upset, openly expressing her feelings of being left out of knowing about my pregnancy sooner. Her discontentment was palpable and added tension to the evening. As her frustration became more apparent, my husband and his brother noticed. The tension escalated until I reached a breaking point and stepped out to gather myself. My mother, noticing my distress, came to comfort me until I felt composed enough to return. Towards the end of the night, Monica made a deliberate effort to say goodbye to me, highlighting her disapproval and the strain on our relationship. As the day came to a close, Monica's interactions with me were limited to mere greetings. Later, when my husband escorted them to their car, a heated argument erupted that I could hear clearly from the foyer. Monica seized the opportunity to escalate her complaints about me, venting her frustrations. By then, all our guests had left, leaving just my parents, Kyle, and his parents. Monica angrily expressed disbelief that I had kept the pregnancy from her, insisting that I didn't consider her family at all. In response, my husband calmly explained that we both wanted to ensure everything was safe before sharing the news with everyone. Monica's reaction intensified into yelling, insisting that as the grandmother, she deserved to know from the start. She criticized my husband for letting me dictate things and challenged his trust in her. Kyle, embarrassed and miserable, faced his mother as she continued her tirade. Tears streamed down my face as Monica's sharp words left me hurt and bewildered. I tried to intervene, but my mother stopped me, warning that any response from me would only escalate the situation further. She was right. I knew Monica was looking for a fight. Despite my mother-in-law provocations, I refused to engage and kept my mouth shut. She persisted in insisting that Kyle should see things her way and accused me of controlling him. My father-in-law eventually intervened, calming her down and driving her away. Unfortunately, this behavior wasn't isolated. It was just one instance in a long list of entitlement and overreactions. For example, she tried to get our baby to call her Ma instead of Grandma, which infuriated me. She would also boast about babysitting and helping us excessively, exaggerating her role. During my post-pregnancy health issues, she criticized my mothering skills and urged me to prioritize her grandchild over myself. Despite these challenges, I tolerated her for the sake of my husband. Recently, my in-laws moved to a new place and kept inviting us to visit. Kyle encouraged me to go alone with our child, Debbie, to appease his mother, who was persistently asking him to visit. Reluctantly, I agreed and planned to visit on a weekend when Debbie had a friend's birthday party. On a sunny Friday afternoon, I dropped Debbie off at the party and headed to my in-laws' new home. The property was impressive, indicating my father-in-law had invested heavily for retirement. The house blended modern and classic styles, set in a beautiful yard with lush greenery and fragrant flowers. When I arrived and rang the doorbell, my mother-in-law opened the door with excitement, assuming it was Kyle. Her expression quickly changed when she saw it was just me, and she asked where Kyle and Debbie were. I explained to my mother-in-law that Kyle had an appointment and Debbie was attending her friend's birthday party, which clearly upset her. She began complaining about our apparent selfishness in not finding time to spend with her. Awkwardly, I changed the topic by expressing interest in checking out her new place. Inside, the house was just as impressive as the exterior. The entrance boasted high ceilings and tasteful decorations. My sister-in-law, Haley, and her 11-year-old son, Jake, were also present. I greeted them warmly, though Haley, like her mother, seemed distant towards me. It was hard to tell if it was personal or to appease her mother. My mother-in-law explained that my father-in-law was out with friends, So she had invited Haley and Jake over for some quality time. I nodded politely and tried to engage with Jake by asking about school. However, my mother-in-law abruptly shifted the conversation to her recent clothing purchases, expressing a desire for my advice on her new wardrobe. This caught me off guard, as she had never sought my advice before. I managed a polite response, agreeing to help. Despite our complicated history, I decided to embrace the opportunity to bond over something as simple as fashion. She seemed pleased and led me to her pride and joy, her newly built walk-in closet. As we admired her extensive collection of clothes, shoes, and accessories, she eagerly sought my opinions on colors, styles, and accessories. It felt surreal given our rocky relationship, but I did my best to provide thoughtful suggestions and be helpful. My mother-in-law encouraged me to check out her closet, saying she would be right back. As I was looking through her new clothes, I heard the sound of running feet behind me. Before I could react, Jake, with mischievous laughter, gave me a push, causing me to stumble and fall face first into the closet. The impact left my head and teeth hurting, and I was initially disoriented. As I gathered my senses, I realized that Jake had swiftly locked the closet door behind me, plunging me into darkness. Panic set in as I felt confined and terrified, desperately banging on the door and calling out for mother-in-law and Sil for help. My pleas seemed to go unheard, or perhaps they were choosing to ignore my distress. Frantically, I fumbled for my phone and managed to switch on the flashlight, but my anxiety grew as I noticed my battery was low. My childhood fear of darkness resurfaced, stemming from a traumatic incident where I accidentally locked myself in my grandmother's closet during a game of hide and seek, and she struggled to find me due to her hearing impairment. Despite my repeated attempts to reach mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I was met with silence, which intensified my sense of isolation. Confused and desperate, I finally dialed my husband's number. When Kyle answered casually, I explained the dire situation with desperation in my voice. He seemed unfazed and asked for more details. I recounted how Jake had pushed me into the closet and locked me inside with the lights off. I pleaded for help as I continued to bang on the door. No one had come to rescue me, and my fear of dark spaces was escalating. When I called Kyle for help, hoping for sympathy, he responded coldly, dismissing my distress as non-emergency and instructing me to call his mother instead. Frustrated, I explained that I had already tried calling both his mother and sister multiple times without success. With my phone battery draining rapidly from using the flashlight, I pleaded with Kyle to come over, reminding him of my fear of darkness that he knew well. However, Kyle remained unmoved, stating he was too busy to come and suggesting I find someone else to help. Stunned and increasingly panicked, I continued to bang on the closet door and call out to mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but their phones remained silent. Feeling trapped and helpless, I reluctantly dialed my father-in-law, Phil, the only person left I could reach out to. Despite knowing he had been out with friends, I hoped he would answer. He picked up, and I nervously explained the situation, disclosing that Jake had locked me in the closet. Despite my attempts to reach out for help, no one was responding. When I finally managed to contact Phil, he assured me he would rush home and was surprised that neither mother-in-law nor sister-in-law had heard my calls all this time. After what felt like an eternity, I heard voices outside, Phil yelling instructions to unlock the closet door. Relief washed over me as I realized help was finally arriving. The door creaked open, flooding the dark space with light. Phil and Sil stood there, their faces a mix of concern and frustration. I emerged from the closet feeling disoriented, but immensely grateful to be free from that confined space. Phil demanded an explanation from mother-in-law about why I had been locked in her closet. Mother-in-law feigned innocence, but I recounted the incident, explaining how Jake had pushed me in and locked the door. To my dismay, both mother-in-law and sister-in-law scoffed at my account, dismissing it entirely and claiming Jake would never do such a thing. Frustrated and angry, I demanded to know why they hadn't responded to my calls or banging on the door. Their excuse was that they were in the backyard, with mother-in-law showing off her new rose garden to Haley and Jake. I turned my anger towards Jake, questioning him directly about why he had locked me inside. Sil interrupted, vehemently defending her son and accusing me of fabricating the story. Their blatant lies left me feeling overwhelmed with frustration and disbelief, especially as it didn't explain how the lights had been turned off. Phil attempted to calm me down, but I knew that mother-in-law and sister-in-law would continue to defend each other regardless of what I said. Defeated and hurt, I realized that the situation was unlikely to be resolved to my satisfaction. When I returned home, still trembling with shock, I called my mother to apologize for not picking up Debbie and explained she might need to stay at their place for the night. I was too shaken to explain what had happened just yet. Waiting for my husband to return, I anticipated confronting him about his family's actions. During dinner, I recounted the incident to my husband, hoping for understanding. Instead, he berated me, accusing me of overreacting and being childish. He dismissed my concerns, refusing to believe that his family would intentionally mistreat me. Gaslighting me, he justified why he couldn't come to help, making me doubt myself. To avoid further conflict, I retreated to bed, feeling profoundly lonely and misunderstood. The weight of the incident lingered heavily, compounded by the dismissiveness from my husband. The next day, while grappling with the emotional aftermath, I received the TikTok link from my cousin. Horrified, I watched the video showing my nephew, Jake, recording the incident and shamelessly sharing it as a prank on TikTok. Seeing Jake's laughter enraged me, and I shared the video in our family chat, demanding apologies now that I had proof. Mother-in-law brushed off the seriousness, claiming it was funny, and sister-in-law echoed her sentiments, dismissing it as a harmless prank. Frustrated, I warned them that if Jake didn't remove the video, I would take legal action. Mother-in-law dismissive response and lack of empathy pushed me over the edge. Frustrated and determined to make them understand the seriousness of the situation, I took action. I immediately called the police, providing them with the TikTok video as evidence. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the police agreed to visit sister-in-law and question her about her 11-year-old child having a TikTok account and posting such prank videos. Sil called me angrily, questioning my audacity for filing a complaint against her. I stood my ground, informing her that I was prepared to take legal action. When she continued to yell, I calmly mentioned that I was recording the conversation and would share it with my lawyer. This silenced her, highlighting the severity of the situation. I felt a sense of justice in teaching my husband's family a lesson for their actions, ensuring they understood the consequences of locking me inside a closet for over an hour. Update 1. In just a few hours, I've received thousands of comments, and I'm grateful that the majority understand why I involved the police. My in-laws have been calling me repeatedly, urging me to withdraw my statement to the police. As of now, no official case has been filed since my nephew is still a child, and the police are investigating to determine the appropriate course of action. When my husband returned from work, he erupted upon learning about the situation. He had tried calling me during the day, but was unable to reach me due to my involvement with the police. Kyle believes that my actions have irreparably damaged the family and insists that I am overreacting to what he views as harmless behavior from Jake, citing his age as justification for not punishing him. I've discussed this with my parents and my sister, all of whom are shocked by the lack of response from my husband and his family, especially given my fear of dark spaces. My dad had a serious conversation with my husband, emphasizing that if I had called for help while trapped in the closet, it was his responsibility to either come to my aid or immediately involve his parents to get me out. The fact that he did neither is troubling to me and my family. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and there has been a significant development. Sister-in-law husband, Vic, who was out of town, returned and learned about the incident between me and Jake. He was furious and immediately demanded that Jake take down the video and apologize to me in person. Vic visited me to discuss the situation further. When Vic arrived at our place with Jake, The atmosphere was tense. Jake looked remorseful, as if he had been severely scolded. Vic gave him a stern look, and Jake promptly apologized to me. During our conversation, Jake revealed that while he did push me into the closet, he felt pressured by mother-in-law. He explained that he used to share prank videos with mother-in-law, and when he expressed hesitation about trying them on family members, mother-in-law encouraged him by suggesting I wasn't technically family since I was just married to my husband. This appalling revelation shocked me. Vic asked Jake if he was being truthful, emphasizing the seriousness of the accusation. Jake broke down in tears, inviting us to check his phone, where we found conversations confirming mother-in-law encouragement of these actions. After saving the screenshots to my phone, I advised Jake strongly against following mother-in-law suggestions, emphasizing that it was inappropriate and wrong. Jake nodded solemnly, and Vic expressed his dismay, acknowledging how sickening the situation was and reconsidering allowing his child to be around mother-in-law. Understanding Vic's concerns, I assured him that I would discuss the matter with my lawyer and the police. However, I emphasized that I would retract my statement on the condition that Jake never uploaded the video again or retained a copy of it. Jake confirmed that he had deleted the video and no longer had a copy. Since my conversation with Vic and Jake, I've begun to question my entire relationship with mother-in-law. It's now clear that she orchestrated the incident and encouraged a child to act on her behalf, which is deeply troubling. I cannot allow myself to be around someone who harbors such animosity towards me and is willing to go to such lengths. Moving forward, I am committed to protecting myself and ensuring that mother-in-law actions do not go unchecked. Update 3. Hello everyone. It's been 4 months since my last update. I've moved out of my husband's place and am currently staying with my parents. As previously updated, my mother-in-law was indeed behind everything. When I confronted her with the screenshots, she initially denied her involvement, claiming my nephew must have manipulated them. However, her lies quickly unraveled when I threatened legal action. Eventually, she begrudgingly admitted to pre-planning the incident with my nephew. She confessed that she saw my visit as the perfect opportunity to play the prank on me. Mother-in-law even claimed that sister-in-law was in on it and enjoyed hearing my distress. She pleaded with me not to pursue legal action, promising it would never happen again. Fortunately, I had recorded our entire conversation. I ended the call with her and forwarded the voice recording to our group chats so everyone could hear mother-in-law admission. I also messaged sister-in-law, expressing my disappointment and hoping her son would grow up to be a better person. As for my husband, our relationship deteriorated further each day. Despite the screenshots and voice recording of his own mother's admission, he never apologized for what his family put me through. Seeing my family rally behind me helped me realize I wasn't overreacting and that what happened was deeply wrong. It's been a big deal for me, even though I decided not to pursue legal action. I couldn't forgive or forget what his family did to me. After everything that happened and my husband's continued support for them, I realized there was no way forward for our marriage. I tried to salvage it, but when your own partner stands by his mother's hurtful actions despite your feelings, you start to realize you deserve better. I moved out so we could begin divorce proceedings. Surprisingly, he didn't seem shocked when I told him I wanted a divorce and didn't fight me on it. It's been incredibly difficult to go through this. I truly loved my husband and imagined a future with him, but these past few months have been eye-opening. I deserve to prioritize myself. I'm grateful to everyone in the comments section and my family for helping me see the truth about my husband and his family. It's a tough journey, but I'm focusing on what's best for me now. It's been almost 2 years since I lost my daughter, Lily. The tears have long dried up, leaving behind an unbearable sense of loss that weighs on me like lead throughout my body. My name is Mark Thompson. My wife Kate passed away early on. She was never in good health, and there were risks during Lily's birth. Still, I honored Kate's wish to have a child. As childbirth approached and her life faded, she smiled at the end, saying, "Please take care of our daughter." Her image often blends with Lily in my recent memories. Since then, I've tried to fill the void by immersing myself in parenting struggles. My love for Lily deepened as she grew, and our time together was cherished. I imagined telling Kate about Lily if we ever met again. Those were genuinely happy times, until they were shattered one day. Lily was about to start elementary school and must have been practicing her route to the school bus stop alone, proudly wearing the backpack I'd bought her. As she walked at a crosswalk, she was hit by a drunk driver. It was a tragic event condensed into a brief news report. Lily had followed all the rules. She did nothing wrong. Why should my daughter have been taken? I couldn't summon the energy to curse or confront the sobbing, apologizing driver. All I could do was stand in shock in front of Lily's lifeless body. It felt like a scene from a TV show, unreal to me. At the funeral, I couldn't cry, but I broke down screaming and crying when I saw Lily's backpack at home. After that, I lived a hollow life. Eventually, my boss encouraged me to take a long leave of absence. I knew I lacked motivation at work and couldn't burden my colleagues anymore, so I gratefully accepted the offer. I found myself wandering aimlessly outside, often ending up at the local park. One day, as I sat blankly on a bench, I noticed a crowd in the distance, a group of kids around Lily's age, teasing one in the middle. I pushed my way through the kids, possibly yelling. I don't remember clearly. Suddenly, the group scattered like spiders. "Are you okay?" I asked the crouching child who looked up at me. My heart nearly stopped. The girl looked just like Lily. Frozen, unable to speak, I watched as she stood up and quietly said, "Thank you," before starting to walk away. "Wait." I blurted out loudly. It was the first time since Lily's death. Are you thirsty? Do you want some juice?" Nervously, I pulled out a bottle of orange juice I had bought for later. "I like orange," she replied. Relieved, I made a nonsensical excuse. "It's still unopened, you know," before handing her the bottle. She accepted it happily, smiling shyly. When she smiled, she looked even more like Lily, causing a faint pain in my heart. I sat down on the bench beside her. The girl introduced herself as Mia. She preferred orange juice over apple juice, dogs over cats, and slides over swings. Lately, she had been wondering why the dogwoods had to lose their leaves. "They'd look so much prettier if they just stayed in bloom," she mused. Not giving a specific answer, I mentioned that it was getting cold, so we should probably head back soon. As we were about to leave the park, Mia murmured, looking down, "Can we meet again?" I gently placed my hand on her head. "I'm here in this park every day around this time. If you feel like it, come by then." Her face lit up brightly. "Really? I'll come every day." True to her word, Mia came to the park every day after that. The bullies hadn't shown their faces in the park since that incident. "Did I scare them that much?" I asked Mia, to which she replied with a mischievous grin. "I've also started standing up for myself more." Recently, Mia would excitedly talk about things that happened at school or a strangely shaped rock she found on the side of the road. I shared stories from my childhood, like having a dog or the time I brought home so many bugs that I nearly gave my mother a heart attack. Strangely, we never tried to talk about our current families. The more I looked at Mia, the more she resembled Lily. If Lily had started elementary school, maybe we would have talked like this. I realized I was looking for Lily and Mia, not without a sense of guilt. Was I just replacing Lily with this child? Sometimes I fell into self-loathing with that thought, but I didn't have the courage to let go of those moments with Mia. I need to tell you, Mia started one day looking sad. "I'm going to start after-school activities next month. The activities would be on weekdays after school until 3:00 p.m. I'm going to do them with a friend from school, so I won't be able to spend as much time as before. But can I still come to see you in the evenings?" How could I say no? That night, my boss contacted me, suggesting that I could return to work, even if only for a short time each day. The hours would be from 8:00 a.m. to 3:00 p.m., a rare arrangement apparently made possible because my colleagues had spoken to my boss on my behalf. After that, Mia and I started meeting after her activities and my work. My colleagues, who had waited for my return, said I seemed different from just before my long leave, with some even getting emotional about it. They said I seemed softer. When I was living with Lily, I never wanted to use parenting as an excuse to slack off at work. I must have been pretty desperate after losing Lily. I had been a mess. Despite repeatedly turning down invitations for meals from friends and colleagues, they never gave up on me. Now I'm realizing just how much support I had around me. I'm filled with gratitude for my colleagues, my boss, and most of all, for Mia, who gave me a chance to find my way back to life. But I can't keep depending on this kindness forever. When I was starting to think about getting back to my regular work schedule, Mia showed up at the park one day looking downcast. Even when I tried to talk to her as usual, she was unresponsive, and the conversation didn't flow. What's wrong? Did something happen? I was worried she might be getting bullied by those kids again. After a while of silence, she looked up at me with a pained expression, and tears started to overflow. As she began to cry, I comforted her and slowly got her to talk. That's when I first learned about her family situation. Mia was an orphan who had been raised in a facility. She had started the after-school activities because volunteers had come to the facility, and she felt obliged to join. Due to the orphanage's curfew until 5:00 p.m., she would leave immediately after her activities and needed to meet me until that time every day. Now, due to the circumstances at the orphanage, it had been decided that she would move to a facility in the next city over. As she finished telling me everything through her sobs, she murmured, "I'm sorry for not saying this for so long. I thought you'd hate me if I told you I lived in an orphanage, so I just couldn't bring myself to say it for the longest time. That's silly. No matter where you are, you're still Mia. I love you no matter what, and that won't change," I reassured her. She nodded happily several times. If she were my real daughter, I wouldn't hesitate to hug her tight. Then, with tears in her eyes, she looked straight at me. "I'll come here every day, so can we still meet?" Of course, I wanted to say. "We'll meet every day." However, it would take more than an hour for Mia to get here from the new orphanage using public transportation. It's not realistic for Mia to travel that distance by herself every day. Having lost a daughter myself, the thought of her being in danger is unbearable. As I hesitated to respond, Mia also became silent, looking down. She probably knew it was an impossible request. "Mia, can you hear my story?" I chose my words carefully, speaking slowly to make it easy for her to understand. I told her about losing my daughter and starting to take time off work, and how meeting Mia had begun to bring color back into my world. She listened silently as I spoke. After finishing my story, I took a deep breath. "Mia, we won't be able to meet like this anymore. You're smart, so you understand, right?" Mia nodded slightly. A child who lost her parents and a parent who lost his child. We were just filling voids for each other. But the time for playing family is over. We have to face reality. It's time for both Mia and me to start walking on solid ground again. Let's make a promise, okay? Mia's shoulders twitched slightly. She looked up and repeated, "A promise?" with curiosity. "In 10 years, when the dogwoods are in full bloom, let's meet here again. By then, you'll surely be a wonderful adult able to come here on your own. I'll do my best too, so there'll be a competition to see who can become a better adult." My voice probably shook a bit towards the end, trying not to let her notice. I gently patted her head, as I always do. Her face lit up as she nodded vigorously. "Yes," she said with a genuine smile. She extended her pinky towards me. "Pinky swear?" Taken aback but amused by her usual demeanor, I laughed and linked pinkies with her. I watched Mia wave goodbye and leave the park until she was out of sight. Then, I collapsed to my knees and cried. At first, I had overlaid Lily's image onto Mia, but as we spent time together, Mia became an irreplaceable presence in her own right, distinct from Lily. The promise to meet again in 10 years. It was made without specifying a day or time, just the season. Mia didn't even know my name. I'm sure she will forget about me eventually, Even without me, she can live a happy life. For me, thanks to meeting Mia, I found the courage to live again. Her presence made me want to face my own life head-on. I can't depend on her forever. After all, she's not my daughter. I cried unabashedly, sobs escaping me. When I finally looked up at the sky, tired from crying, beautiful stars were shining in the dark sky. Strangely, my heart felt clear. It felt like Kate and Lily were watching over me. The encounter with Mia must have been necessary for me to move forward. I hope the time spent with me was meaningful for her too. Perhaps my late wife and daughter had a hand in our meeting. I slapped my face to psych myself up and hurried home, thinking about the future to come. Before I knew it, 10 years had passed. Now I am sitting calmly on that park bench and looking at the dogwoods. The day after that day, I went to my boss first thing in the morning and asked to return to my normal duties. With his approval, I worked hard to make up for the time I had missed, wanting to be someone Mia and Lily wouldn't be ashamed of. My efforts paid off. I became relied upon again at work, with my colleagues saying, "The old Mark is back." I eventually got promoted and gradually began to regain confidence in myself. And just like that, 10 years flew by. In those 10 years, I hadn't looked at the flowering dogwoods. Actually, I avoided them because they reminded me of Mia. I couldn't answer her question about why dogwoods fall. Now, I think I can do it properly. Dogwoods are beautiful because they fall. People find value in their blooming and falling. Kate and Lily bloomed fully and then fell. But what I always remember isn't their departure, but all the smiles and memories they left behind. Life is like dogwoods. Everyone will eventually fall, but there's always a time when they bloom fully. You've got a way with words, an answer that shouldn't come back, and a mischievous smile that I shouldn't see, flipped through my mind and dissipated. I've run through these 10 years with all my might. If I could meet Mia and Lily again, would they smile and wave at me? Have I become the cool adult I wanted to be for them? Breathing in the spring air deeply and smelling the dogwoods, I closed my eyes. I felt a gust of wind and the sensation of flower petals dancing. At the same time, I heard, "Never forget our pinky promise, right?" A voice more mature, but still familiar to my ears sounded behind me. Slowly, I opened my eyes and stood up. "Thank goodness," I said with disbelief. I awkwardly turned around. "This one hasn't been opened yet, okay," the girl, now in a uniform, said with a playful smile. In her hand was a bottle of orange juice. Another 10 years have passed since that day of reunion. I'm looking at the dogwoods again, this time with Mia by my side. "How many times is this now, watching the dogwoods together like this?" murmurs Mia, who has grown up to be beautiful. "I'm not sure, since we've seen them every year since the 11th time when we reunited," she told me. "I'm not a kid anymore, so stop patting my head," she said, scrunching up her face. "Or is it the 12th? I continued, to which she laughed. "You're as vague as ever." Her smile seemed even more beautiful, not just because she's at that age, but because today, Maya shines brighter than anyone. That day 10 years ago, I was stunned as I watched a girl approach me. I flashed back to the first time I looked into Mia's eyes from a close distance, just like when we first met and she was being bullied. I can't remember how we conversed after that. Next thing I knew, I was being taken to the orphanage where Mia lived. "You're the person Mia always talked about." The teacher in charge of Mia at the orphanage looked at me with deep emotion. From the beginning, she had talked about our promise to win the competition of who could become a better adult. She devoted herself to her studies, was active in sports and volunteer activities. Mia has also been a big help looking after the younger kids. I'd always thought it must be because of the man's influence. "I've always wondered what kind of person the man was," said the teacher with a laugh, implying she had been worried I might be someone weird. I learned that Mia had been visiting that park daily for a week since the dogwoods started blooming, waiting with an unopened bottle of orange juice. When the teacher told me that, I couldn't help but cry. She pretended not to notice. That day, dragged by Mia, I played with the kids at the orphanage with all my might and suffered from muscle aches the following day. Since then, I've met with Maya frequently, advising her on her career path and love life. Something about love I might not have been able to do with my own daughter. I wonder about that. I hear a voice that couldn't possibly be Lily's. Is that Kate chuckling beside her? Mark, lost in these thoughts, Mia's voice snapped me back to the present. Thank you for today, she said, blushing slightly in her pure white dress. Dressed in a tuxedo I was not used to, I stood with Mia arm in arm, looking at the dogwoods in front of the church. Mia, make sure you're happy, I managed to say, unable to find the words to tell her how beautiful she was. Mia teared up a bit at my words, her face scrunching up as she smiled, saying, yes. What kind of bride scrunches up her face like that? I joked, struggling to hold back my own tears. I walked with her into the church. Inside, there were her teachers, friends, and many people who had colored her life. At the end of the wedding aisle, a young man who would continue to love her stood, smiling warmly. Mia, you've really become beautiful, not just on the outside, but inside as well. Life is a series of hardships. Maybe the happy times are like the moment when dogwoods are in full bloom. Being able to savor and feel happiness might be the most important part of life. Mark, it's time for the toast. Mia called out to me, snapping me out of my reverie. Laughter broke out around us, and my face flushed. I didn't hear anything about leading a toast, shooting her a mock glare. I was met with that unchanged, mischievous smile of hers from years past. Seeing the smile, my concerns faded away, and I raised my glass. Mia, thank you for making me the father of the bride. My ex-wife recently passed away in an accident. I've been considering taking in our twin daughters, but I didn't think you would agree, so I apologize for bringing it up. When I mentioned it, I thought I misheard my wife's cheerful response, thinking she agreed to taking in 2 more kids. To my surprise, she said it was okay and that we should bring them home. I wondered why she agreed to such a sudden request. Later, she explained her reason. My name is Hayden, and I've been married to Leela for 2 years. I am divorced, and Leela is my second wife. The reason for my divorce was because my ex-wife, Amy, had an affair. Amy loved flashy things, which were the complete opposite of me. Her extroverted and friendly personality attracted many friends, unlike my introverted nature. She seemed to like that I had a good career at a well-known company and married me for it. Amy kept trying to get my attention, and I eventually married her. Life with lively Amy was enjoyable in its own way, and I'm grateful that she gave birth to our twin daughters, Moira and Clara, who are my treasures. When Moira and Clara turned 2, Amy suddenly told me she wanted a divorce because she was pregnant with someone else's child. I was shocked by how casually she said it and didn't understand at first. I was furious and demanded to know who the other man was. It turned out to be a foolish man she often met, one of her many friends who even attended our wedding. He betrayed me and stole my wife. Disgusted by the situation, I took Moira and Clara and stayed at my parents' house. We ended up divorcing, and both Amy and I had to pay alimony, but I couldn't win custody of the girls. I knew it was difficult for a father to win custody, but since my wife was the one who broke our marriage, it was especially hard to accept. I couldn't change the decision and was only allowed to see Moira and Clara regularly in exchange for child support payments. I looked forward to the days I could see them and made sure our time together was filled with fun memories like going to theme parks and zoos. However, living together was no longer an option, and after returning the girls to Amy, I found myself crying alone on the bus ride home, realizing my heart was empty after losing my wife and daughters. I was feeling so mentally drained that I couldn't see a reason to keep going. A grown man crying on a bus must have been a strange sight, as the other passengers started to move away. Then, a woman named Leela approached me out of concern. She asked if I was okay and suggested we get off at the next stop together. Leela wasn't just being curious or showing pity, she genuinely cared. It struck me as unusual and made me wonder why she would be kind to someone like me. When I told her I was fine, she insisted that people who are fine don't cry and handed me a handkerchief. She insisted on getting off with me at the next stop. I tried to deflect her kindness, but she found a bench at the bus stop where I ended up sharing my sad story. Layla listened intently, nodding along, which made me feel like she truly cared. Lila's words gave me hope. She assured me that while I might be going through a dark period, brighter days would come. Her kindness truly saved me. Using the excuse of returning her handkerchief after washing it, I got her contact information and started meeting her often. As I got to know Lila more, I realized she was different. She cared for everyone and was kind to all. Despite her occasional clumsy mistakes, she was genuine. Eventually, I suspected there might be something more to her kindness, but she wasn't the type to have hidden motives. Her sincerity and occasional blunders, followed by asking me for advice, made me fall in love with her. I took the first step and proposed to Lila. Lila, you've brightened up my life. Will you marry me? I'll never forget the moment she smiled happily at my awkward proposal. Even after Lila and I had a son named Tom, I continued to visit Moira and Clara regularly. Lila knew about the child support payments and that I had twin daughters. I was afraid she might feel uncomfortable, so I never mentioned it. Feeling guilty, I lied and said I was going out with friends instead of telling her the truth. Despite this, Lila would always send me off with a smile, saying, "Take care." One day, I received a sudden call informing me that my ex-wife, Amy, had passed away in a car accident along with her current husband and their child. It was Amy's mother who called, sounding depressed. She explained that she couldn't take care of Moira and Clara, my twin daughters, and mentioned they might need to be placed in a facility if no one could care for them. Without hesitation, I told her I would take them in. However, after impulsively agreeing, I felt overwhelmed with guilt. I was now building a new family with Lila and our son Tom, and knew it might be impossible to manage everything. So, I decided to talk to Lila about it. I approached Lila and explained the situation. Actually, my ex-wife passed away in an accident. I've been thinking about taking in our twin daughters, but I assume you wouldn't agree. Sorry for bringing this up. To my surprise, Lila responded compassionately, "Oh, that's terrible. It's okay." I was prepared for her to suggest divorce or be upset, so I thought I misheard her. She continued, "It means we'll have 2 more kids. It's okay, bring them home. They must be feeling lost without their mom suddenly gone." Puzzled by her acceptance, I asked why she was okay with this. She rolled her eyes and laughed, saying, "Silly, you've always cared for the twins, haven't you? I knew you were meeting them regularly. I noticed how you always sneak out and come back in a good mood. I knew you wouldn't cheat on me, so it couldn't be an affair. See, I'm such a good detective, right?" In that moment, I realized just how generous and understanding Lila was. "Thank you," I said, grateful for her support and kindness. After thanking Lila, I drove to my former in-laws' house to pick up Moira and Clara. When I found them, the 5-year-old twins were sleeping cuddled together, their cheeks marked with traces of tears. My heart ached seeing them like that. I expressed my gratitude to my former mother-in-law and gently woke Moira and Clara, explaining the situation as simply as possible for children. Both of them cried upon hearing the news that they wouldn't see their mother again, but they bravely said, "We want to be with you, Daddy," accepting to live with me. As we drove back home, I told them about Lila and Tom, explaining that Lila was a kind and wonderful woman and Tom was a cute little baby. Moira and Clara seemed anxious, but they nodded quietly. When we arrived home, Lila had prepared a feast with dishes that children love. She introduced herself to Moira and Clara with a warm smile, saying, "Welcome, I'm Lila. I'll be living with you guys from now on, so let's get along. I know you two must be very sad right now, but it's okay. You have your dad, and of course, I'm here too." Lila spoke to them gently, encouraging them to eat. Moira and Clara hesitated at first, but soon began eating heartily, which relieved me. After bathing them and putting them to bed, I discovered that Lila had already bought children's bedding. She had carried it home herself since I had taken the car. Lila laughed it off, but I was truly grateful. Moira and Clara initially refused to sleep with Lila, so I ended up sleeping between them. When I apologized for their behavior, Lila reassured me, saying, "It's too sudden for them. For a while, you'll be their main support. Don't worry about me, just do your best." During the night, Moira and Clara cried in their sleep, making it a heart-wrenching night. However, living together went smoother than I had expected. Lila didn't mind when the twins looked at her suspiciously. She scolded them like a real mother when they misbehaved and comforted them gently when they cried. As we settled into our new life together, it became clear that Amy hadn't been very affectionate towards the twins. Moira and Clara tried to do everything by themselves, from getting snacks out of the fridge to putting away their clothes. Initially, I thought they were quite independent, but their behavior seemed unusual. As Lila and I discussed Amy's neglect of Moira and Clara, we realized just how little care Amy had taken of them. The clothes sent for Moira and Clara were extremely limited, and when Lila cooked for them, they asked hesitantly if Lila would give them food too. They were puzzled by simple routines like taking a daily shower, having been used to bathing only once every 2 days. It was also odd that Amy went on trips with her new family, leaving Moira and Clara behind. It became clear that the girls had been treated poorly, and I couldn't contain my anger. I can't forgive Amy or her husband. They had a duty to make Moira and Clara happy after gaining custody, yet why didn't they take care of them properly? I trembled with rage, but Amy and her husband were no longer alive for me to confront. I felt powerless, clenching my fists in frustration. Lila comforted me, saying, "Hayden, I understand your anger. Not properly caring for adorable kids like Moira and Clara is infuriating. But there's no use holding onto anger towards people who are no longer here. The best revenge on Amy and her husband is making Moira and Clara happy with us. Let's pour all our love into them and Tom, not getting caught up in anger or hatred towards those who've passed." Her calm and compassionate words moved me deeply. I blamed myself for not realizing how Moira and Clara were being treated despite meeting them regularly. Lila comforted me, saying, "It's okay, Hayden. You're doing everything you can." I dedicated myself to being a good father for Moira and Clara, and of course for Tom, fulfilling my responsibility as a parent. Over time, Moira and Clara gradually warmed up to Lila's bright and friendly demeanor. Initially wary of her, they eventually wanted to sleep next to Lila. When they argued over who got to be closer to Lila, she hugged them both and said with a smile, "No need to fight over me. I love you both, so it's okay." Lila's positive and reassuring presence was like magic. Her constant assurance was a salvation for Moira, Clara, and me. As time passed, Moira and Clara grew up and became fifth graders. On the open school day, Lila and I shared a nostalgic moment, reminiscing about our youth and sharing stories from when we were their age. I remember attending Moira and Clara's school to make a presentation about feelings towards parents and personal treasures. The students were tasked with writing essays on the theme of family, and I was a bit worried about how Lila might feel if Moira and Clara wrote only about Amy and her husband. It could potentially hurt Lila's feelings. When I expressed my concerns to Lila, she laughed them off. Even if their essays are all about Amy and her husband, it doesn't bother me at all. If that means they were happy with those two, isn't that a good thing? The challenge of having twins was deciding who would attend which class on open school day. Despite feeling a bit saddened, both Moira and Clara insisted they wanted Lila to come. To be fair, we had them play a coin toss to decide. Moira won, which left Clara feeling downcast. I reassured Clara, "Don't you like being with Daddy? I love you very much." Clara responded, "It's not that I don't like being with you, Daddy. I love you too, but I wanted Lila to hear." I worried if Clara was starting to rebel, but her true feelings became clear after she read her essay on open school day. In her essay, Clara wrote about Lila, mentioning her life with Amy and her husband, which wasn't very happy. She shared feeling incredibly anxious when her mother died, but also expressed being happy to live with me and scared of living with Lila, whom she didn't know. Clara then spoke about the things Lila did for her, like taking baths together and playing with bubbles for the first time. Leela would soothe her when she cried at night until she fell asleep. The way Clara described Leela in her essay painted a picture of a loving mother figure. Clara concluded her essay by saying, "I want to call Leela Mom, but I've been too shy to say it, so I've decided to call her Mom when I get home today." As Clara finished reading, I couldn't help but cry uncontrollably. Other parents were tearing up, and even the teacher was wiping away tears. After the open school day, Leela, who was with Moira, had red eyes and a runny nose just like me. When I asked what happened, Leela shared that Moira had read a similar essay. It seemed they had planned it. After nodding to each other, Moira and Clara turned to Leela and said in unison, "Mom, we love you." Leela broke down in tears, hugging them tightly and trembling as she said, "Mom loves you both so much too." Naturally, I burst into tears again. Our family was living happily, and any thoughts of revenge against Amy and her husband had vanished without notice. All I wished for was to protect this beloved family. Being able to live such a happy life was all thanks to Leela. When I expressed my gratitude to her, she simply smiled and said, "Thanks to you too." I could never thank her enough. Rich Mill didn't like me because I came from a poor background. Once she played a mean trick by calling me the housemate at her party and then posted it online to embarrass me. Hello, everyone. I'll refer to my husband as Harry and my mother-in-law as Olivia. I'm 28 years old and I've been married to Harry for about 2 years. Harry, also 28, and I were friends in college, and that's how we met. We didn't start dating until after we graduated. A few years ago, we met again at a friend's party and have been together ever since, almost 4 years now, including our time married. Harry and I love each other, and I don't regret marrying him. But the one thing I struggle with is his mother, Olivia. Olivia raised Harry on her own as a single mother, which is impressive. But she can be very arrogant and cold. This makes it hard for me to like her as a person. From the very beginning, she made it clear she didn't approve of me. And I think it's because of my financial background. I come from a poor family. My parents had to work hard to support me and my 3 sisters. We were quite poor growing up. My dad was a janitor, and my mom took on various odd jobs to make ends meet. I'm not ashamed of it. In fact, I'm proud of where I come from, as are my siblings. We never saw our parents' jobs as something to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. They were honest, hard-working people, and we're proud to be like them. Olivia, on the other hand, is judgmental about social class. She made a face when I told her my dad used to be a janitor and my mom did odd jobs for wealthier families. This happened the first time we had dinner with her, and ever since then, she's made it clear I'm not welcome in her family. She's never said anything directly to me, but she keeps her distance physically, as if she can't touch me. Whenever she invites us for dinner, she even uses different silverware and plates for me, ones that aren't as nice as the ones she and her son use. I didn't bring it up at first because I thought I might be overthinking things, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing. But then other things happened that made me realize Olivia was being classist. For instance, she would give me cheap birthday presents and leave the price tags on them. Olivia ran her own business and could afford nice gifts, like an expensive watch for Harry or an all-expenses-paid trip to Bali for her assistant. But for me, she gave a knockoff purse that probably didn't cost more than $85. After that, I knew for sure she didn't like me. The biggest mistake I made was not talking to Harry about it earlier because I didn't know how to bring up something so upsetting. I have faced discrimination before, but never from someone I hope to have a good relationship with in the future. I actually used to admire Olivia before I saw this side of her. I want to start my own business someday too. So when Harry told me about his mother's business success, I was impressed. My sisters and I study finance in college with student loans and now have decent jobs. I work in marketing and advertising but dream of building something on my own. Before Harry and I got married, I hoped Olivia would accept me eventually. But it didn't happen, and it got too awkward. A few months after we married, I finally told Harry I felt uncomfortable visiting his mother because she made me feel inferior, and I suspected it was because of my family's background and my dad's job as a janitor. Harry was understanding and said he would talk to his mother to clear the air. He did talk to her, but she denied everything and started crying, saying she had been nothing but warm to me and that accusing her of being classist was unfair. This made me feel like she was trying to manipulate us. I told Harry I appreciated his efforts, but I still didn't feel comfortable around her. So we agreed that Harry would stay in touch with his mom, but I would keep my distance until I felt ready to talk to her. He didn't cut her off completely, but he distanced himself, and I knew she resented me for it. Now that we were married, I didn't have much choice but to deal with her, so I tried to make peace with the situation. We'd see each other at family gatherings, but otherwise, we kept our distance, and that worked for both of us for a while. However, a few days ago, she texted me at noon saying she wanted me to come early to her 50th birthday party because she wanted to make things right between us. She admitted she'd treated me badly in the past and wanted to apologize. I was hopeful and agreed to come early. When I arrived, she immediately told me to wait in the kitchen. I was confused but did as she asked. Later, she came into the kitchen and introduced me to the wait staff as her housemaid, recording the whole thing and laughing like it was a funny joke. Everyone was uncomfortable, and I was incredibly humiliated. I ran out of the house in tears and drove home. I had texted Harry that I was visiting his mom, but he was at work and hadn't read my message. So when I got home, I felt even more alone and cried myself to sleep. A couple of hours later, Harry came home and showed me a video his mom had posted. It was the prank she played on me, cut off right before I started crying. She captioned it as a prank gone wrong, but it was clear she posted it to humiliate me. I was devastated and couldn't stop crying. Harry assured me not to worry and promised to do everything possible to have the video taken down. He was determined to make his mother regret what she did, even though she wasn't responding to his messages or calls due to being busy with the party. He knew she would eventually call to ask why he hadn't arrived yet. When she did call, Harry was ready to confront her. About an hour after I woke up from crying, his mother called him. I can't repeat the words Harry used, but he was very upset with her. He ended the call by threatening to file a lawsuit against her for what she did to me. After Harry finished yelling at her, he apologized to me repeatedly for not taking action against Olivia when I first told him I was uncomfortable around her. I didn't blame Harry because initially, I downplayed the situation, making it seem like it wasn't a big deal. I also never spoke up about other incidents that bothered me, and Harry isn't very observant or attentive, so he didn't pick up on these issues himself. I couldn't blame him for not cutting off his mother because he didn't fully understand how terrible she could be. On the day of Olivia's party, I finally opened up to Harry about everything that had been bothering me. He was furious and told me I should have informed him sooner, which I agreed with. He apologized for not noticing how his mother was treating me and falling short in supporting me. We talked it through, and then he contacted his lawyer to see if there was a legal way to hold his mother accountable. Unfortunately, we couldn't pursue a lawsuit for emotional distress because there were no physical repercussions from what she did. Harry was determined to take action, though. He didn't want to just cut his mother out of our lives. He wanted to teach her a lesson. I could see how angry he was on my behalf, and I appreciated his support, so I didn't try to dissuade him. The next morning, Harry told me he had given his mother an ultimatum. She had 3 days to issue a public apology, not just to me but also to my family, and it had to be in video form. If she didn't comply, he threatened to expose her behavior to all her business contacts, which could seriously damage her reputation as a successful female entrepreneur. Harry believed that his mother's actions were not in line with feminist values, especially considering her role as a female business owner. He knew that tarnishing her reputation could significantly impact her future prospects in business. We're now on the second day of the ultimatum Harry gave to his mother. I'm feeling uneasy about the situation because it seems like a form of blackmail. I expressed my concerns to Harry, but he dismissed them, believing this was the only way to make Olivia realize her behavior was unacceptable and prevent future issues. I'm uncomfortable with the idea of my husband going after my mother-in-law in this way. Update 1. Following the advice of many of you, I sat down with Harry after he returned from work and shared my concerns once again. I explained that while Olivia was clearly in the wrong, I didn't want us to stoop to her level just to make her apologize. I told Harry that an apology forced under these circumstances wouldn't mean anything sincere. I expressed that I didn't want him to go through with his plan to pressure Olivia into apologizing. Instead, I suggested that he call off the ultimatum and simply tell Olivia to stay away from us. Surprisingly, Harry didn't resist this time. He broke down in tears. It took several minutes of consoling before he could explain what was upsetting him. As many of you pointed out, Harry was trying to overcompensate for not taking the situation seriously enough initially. He admitted feeling guilty after watching the video of Olivia's behavior, which has since been deleted. He realized he had been focusing on getting back at his mom rather than truly listening to me and respecting my wishes. Harry acknowledged that he made the same mistake again by not taking my concerns seriously enough. He recognized my submissive nature and admitted he hadn't been listening to me as he should. We had a deep conversation about this, and Harry texted Olivia, informing her that an apology wasn't necessary because he no longer wanted any contact with her. I'm proud of both of us for handling the situation well and making sure we face the problem together as a team, rather than turning against each other. Harry and I deeply care for each other, which made it difficult for us to discuss our biggest issues. That's why we decided to seek marriage counseling. I've already started looking into it, and I hope we can start working on our marriage within the next week. Our goal is to ensure that such upsetting incidents never happen again. Dealing with this situation has been one of the worst experiences of my life, and I never want to feel the way I did a couple of days ago ever again. I'm relieved that Harry has decided to cut ties with Olivia, because I couldn't bear to see her again without feeling an overwhelming urge to confront her about her arrogance. I won't act on it, but I hope someone else does. Update 2. A week has passed since Olivia's party, and she hadn't reached out to us after Harry called off the ultimatum. We sensed something was brewing because Olivia wasn't the type to let things go so easily. However, as days went by without any contact from her, we started to forget about the situation. Then today, Olivia unexpectedly showed up at our house with her lawyer. When I answered the door, she walked past me without acknowledging me and called out for Harry to meet her in the living room. It was frustrating because she acted as if she owned the place, ordering us around in our own home. Harry refused to comply with her demands and told her he didn't want to speak with her right now and asked her to leave with her lawyer. Olivia persisted, insisting that Harry sit down because he needed to hear what she had to say. I urged Harry to just sit down so we could get this over with and get her out of the house. I was prepared to hear her threats or demands if it meant resolving the situation quickly. Reluctantly, Harry took a seat on the couch, and I sat down beside him to assert our authority in our own home, despite Olivia's disregard for me. She then instructed her lawyer to read out a document outlining her terms. Essentially, the document stated that Olivia wanted Harry to leave me, or else she would disinherit him, distributing her assets to other family members, employees, and charities. The document included a list of properties and assets involved. After the lawyer finished reading Olivia's document, which seemed like an attempt to intimidate Harry, he remained unfazed. Harry appeared uninterested, playing with my ring and not paying attention to the list of assets being read out. Once the reading was done, Olivia asked Harry what he planned to do next, emphasizing that if he stayed with me, he'd forfeit his inheritance forever. To everyone's surprise, Harry stood up, walked over to his mother, and gave her a hug, saying goodbye. Olivia's expression shifted from triumphant to shocked, which made me giggle uncontrollably. Finally acknowledging my presence, Olivia snapped at me, hurling insults and calling me names. I chose to ignore her, knowing it would aggravate her further. Harry didn't engage with her either. Instead, he calmly suggested we return to our room to avoid witnessing his mother's escalating meltdown, which was becoming embarrassing. We spoke to each other normally, pretending Olivia wasn't there, and headed back to our room to irritate her further. However, Olivia crossed a line by accusing me of being a gold digger, saying she regretted approving of our marriage and insinuating that I was only interested in Harry's money because my dad was a loser. I didn't argue with her accusations, but defended my father's hard work and integrity. I told her that despite her wealth, my husband was rejecting her, which clearly struck a nerve. Today, I made it clear to Olivia that I was not a gold digger, but a self-sufficient working woman who didn't rely on my husband's money. I told her she had no basis for her accusations. I then demanded that she leave my house immediately before I called the police to have her escorted out. Eventually, she left, but her visit had already left a sour taste in our mouths. While it was an unpleasant experience, at least we managed to assert ourselves and set boundaries. Hopefully, Olivia will remember not to meddle with us and leave us alone in the future. Update 3. Hey everyone, I'm back because something terrible happened involving Olivia. About 2 weeks had passed since her last visit, and Harry and I thought the chapter was finally over. However, I just received a call from my parents an hour ago, and they told me Olivia paid them a visit, and it wasn't good. Olivia barged into their house and insulted them, calling them terrible parents who raised a gold-digging and conniving person like me. She said hurtful things about me, but what's most upsetting is how she attacked my parents. Olivia told my mother that if she had been a better parent who spent more time at home raising us instead of working, maybe we would have turned out better. She also insulted my dad again for his profession, implying that his daughters were as dirty as the trash he cleaned up. My parents were almost in tears recounting what Olivia said, and I couldn't contain my anger. I'm currently at work, unable to do anything, but once I'm done for the day, I'm heading straight to Olivia's house to confront her. She needs to be put in her place for disrespecting my parents in their own home. I texted Harry about the situation, but he's busy with work and hasn't replied yet. I don't necessarily want him to come with me, but I've informed him so he won't be caught off guard if Olivia reaches out to him, upset about our confrontation. Update 4. Hi everyone, I'm back after confronting Olivia at her house a few hours ago. And let me tell you, it was incredibly satisfying to let her have it. When I arrived, Olivia smirked as she opened the door, but I lost my temper right then and there. I pushed past her and went inside, demanding to know if she had visited my parents and said those awful things. She admitted to it, looking pleased with herself, which only fueled my anger. I yelled at her loudly, calling her a hypocrite and a failure as a mother for not prioritizing Harry's happiness over her own selfish desires. I even made a harsh comment about her deceased husband, which made her start crying. I continued berating her for several minutes until I ran out of steam. Seeing her break down was oddly satisfying after all the pain she caused me and my family. After leaving Olivia's house, I returned home, and Harry came back shortly after. He had left work early, assuming I'd be at Olivia's, but by the time he arrived, I had already left. When he entered Olivia's house, he found her crying on the couch, knowing that I had confronted her. Harry surprised me by expressing pride in me for standing up for myself and not allowing anyone to walk over me. He hugged me, apologized for his mother's behavior toward my parents, and then told me that he had a final conversation with Olivia. He made it clear that we would have no further contact with her and that we pursue a restraining order if she bothered us again. When Harry asked Olivia about what I had said, she expected him to defend her and criticize me. But Harry disappointed her by standing by my side. He explained that he supported me because I was right and had never intentionally hurt Olivia, unlike her treatment of me. Harry walked out of Olivia's house despite her protests, affirming his commitment to me. We're still attending marriage counseling, and things are going well. Now we know we have each other's backs forever, which is all I ever really wanted. Mary, what's the deal with me being stuck solo at my sister's wedding? I found myself isolated, and when I inquired about it to her mother-in-law, she smirked before replying. Oh, was that the case? Well, it's all right. A middle school graduate is hardly a feather in the family cap. Mary always had a knack for belittling me, and as others began to take notice, I felt even more out of place, drowning in embarrassment. "What do you even know about Eddie? And you don't know my brother," I muttered, feeling utterly defeated. Then my sister Michelle appeared, and the dynamic shifted. "My name's Eddie Smith. I turned 42 this year," I began, unraveling the story of our upbringing. "Ever since our parents passed away in a car accident when we were kids, Michelle and I, just a year apart, were raised by our grandparents. Though we felt vulnerable without our parents, our grandparents filled our lives with love, ensuring we never felt alone. However, as our grandparents grew older, I felt the weight of responsibility. I started working right after middle school, despite Michelle's encouragement to pursue higher education. Are you sure you don't want to go to high school? You don't have to bear this burden alone, she urged, her concern palpable. But I couldn't shake the need to support our family, especially Michelle, whose dream of becoming a doctor fueled my determination. I don't have a dream like you, Michelle. Right now, my dream is to contribute to the family as soon as possible, I explained, knowing she felt guilty about my sacrifice. Yet, she understood once I shared my true feelings. Michelle's hard work paid off, and she secured a spot in college, eventually becoming a doctor. With our grandparents gone by the time she earned her medical license, we leaned on each other for support. "Hey, Eddie, I'm free this weekend. How about we grab a bite?" Michelle suggested, extending an olive branch of camaraderie. "That sounds perfect. I'm free too. Let's go for drinks," I replied, grateful for the bond we shared. Michelle and I had a close relationship, often spending our free time together, even as I juggled various temporary jobs to make ends meet. Lately, there's been someone causing me trouble, Mary, Michelle's mother-in-law. To my surprise and delight, she recently got engaged, making her my relative by marriage. Initially, based on what Michelle had told me about Mary being a gentle and modest woman, I was hopeful. Coming from a family without parents, I looked forward to our relatives coming together. However, my naive optimism was shattered at our first encounter. "Eddie, you don't look as impressive as Michelle. It's disappointing that you're nothing like what I imagined being related to you would be," Mary remarked as soon as Michelle left the table. Her demeanor completely changed, and even Michelle's fiancé, Tom, remained silent as Mary continued her tirade. "You know, Michelle graduated from medical school and works at the forefront as a doctor. Despite being a woman, she carries herself with such confidence. But I never heard about having such a loser brother," Mary continued, disregarding any attempt from Tom to intervene. When Mary came to announce the engagement, she was all smiles in front of Michelle, but as soon as Michelle left the room, her tone shifted, and she began berating me. I was shocked into silence by her sudden change. She looked down on me with disdain, mocking my middle school education and my job. She made it clear that having someone with my educational background as a relative was a problem for her. Despite her husband being a doctor and her working in medical administration, Mary constantly imposed unreasonable demands on me. She even went as far as suggesting that I cut ties with Michelle to avoid embarrassment for her family. I never expected to be insulted like this, especially since Michelle had expressed excitement about our meeting. Feeling embarrassed and hurt by Mary's words, I couldn't help but wonder how things got so messed up. I felt trapped, knowing that Michelle and I were each other's only blood relatives and that cutting ties wasn't an option. Throughout our conversation, Mary continued to make snide remarks, leaving me feeling even more isolated and disheartened. Since we don't live together or see each other often, I've managed to endure Mary's persistent attempts to convince me to cut ties with Michelle. Maintaining a good relationship with Michelle is paramount to me, as she's the only family I have left. Ideally, I'd like to get along with Mary too, but it seems she can't accept me due to my lower level of education. "Why do I have to deal with someone with such a low education like you?" Mary's words continue to sting. Being judged solely on my educational background makes my blood boil. Despite this, I didn't object to Michelle and Tom's marriage. Mary's persistence in trying to separate us has only intensified since their wedding date was set. Reluctantly, I prepared for the wedding, knowing I couldn't miss such a significant family event despite my apprehensions. Upon arrival at the venue, I was shocked to find myself seated alone at the back, contrary to what Michelle had assured me. Mary's presence only added to my discomfort, her judgmental gaze making me feel even more out of place. "Eddie, you're looking quite shabby today. Couldn't you even prepare proper attire for a wedding?" Mary's tone was as cutting as ever as she berated me for my appearance. Asking her about my isolated seating only elicited a smirk from her, followed by her disparaging remarks about my education. The humiliation was unbearable, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of her scornful words. Despite my attempts to reason with her, Mary's insults only grew more heated, culminating in her insistence that I leave the wedding altogether. Her disdain for me was palpable, leaving me no choice but to endure her verbal onslaught in silence. Filled with the desire to escape, I made a silent vow to sever ties with Mary once and for all. However, before I could make my exit, Michelle approached me, unaware of the turmoil brewing within me. Before I could utter a word to Michelle, Mary interjected, dismissing me as a failure of a brother and suggesting that I leave. Michelle, however, defended me, citing how I had supported her journey to becoming a doctor. Despite her protests, Mary continued to belittle me, claiming that our family was now part of the upper class, unlike me. As the tension escalated, Peter, Michelle's fiancé, intervened, urging us to stop causing a scene. Mary, desperate to shift the blame onto me, attempted to convince Peter that I was at fault. But before she could succeed, Dr. Williams, the hospital director, approached me with gratitude for a past encounter. Mary couldn't contain her shock as Dr. Williams praised me and offered me a position at the hospital. Recalling how I had assisted him during a crisis on the street, Dr. Williams expressed his admiration for my proactive nature. His offer of employment was a turning point for me, as I had been struggling to find a stable job. Grateful for the opportunity, I accepted Dr. Williams' offer and embarked on a new chapter in my career. Despite facing challenges, I worked diligently and obtained certifications in medical administration and secretarial duties. Dr. Williams continued to support and guide me, ultimately changing my life for the better. He was the one who saved my life. My brother was indeed very grateful for your help. Michelle expressed her appreciation to Dr. Williams. To my surprise, Peter had met me a few times at meetings, being aware of the situation. However, Mary, who had always looked down on me, probably didn't know. Her shock was palpable upon hearing about my relationship with Dr. Williams. What the hell? A middle school graduate like him becoming an executive secretary at the headquarters? Impossible, Mary exclaimed in disbelief. She seemed unable to fathom that someone they had dismissed as a middle school graduate could hold such a prestigious position. In her eyes, my achievements seemed like deception, and she dismissed even my ability to speak German as mere showing off. The headquarters, a gathering place for the group's top talents, was a realm of the elite. Mary struggled to comprehend how someone like me could belong there. Until now, Mary had refrained from openly speaking ill of me in front of Michelle. But today, it seemed she couldn't contain her disdain any longer. Her insults were directed at me, regardless of who was present. Dr. Williams, however, swiftly addressed her remarks. "So, are you saying that I'm lying?" His question left Mary visibly shaken. He made it clear that he didn't judge people based on their educational background. Eddie, indeed, has been demonstrating his capabilities adequately at the hospital, Dr. Williams affirmed, his words warming my heart. I had always been somewhat conscious of my educational background, and Dr. Williams' recognition of my efforts meant a lot to me. However, Mary couldn't accept my achievements and dismissed them as underhanded tactics. She insisted that she could do her job better than me and accused me of deceiving everyone. But Dr. Williams pointed out that her reputation at the hospital wasn't exemplary, citing several resignations among the staff due to her behavior. Under Mary's continued uproar, Dr. Williams coldly retorted, questioning her integrity regarding the misuse of funds at the affiliated hospital. Mary was visibly shaken, showing signs of panic as Dr. Williams confronted her about the financial discrepancies. Peter denied any involvement in the misuse of funds, prompting Dr. Williams to announce a thorough investigation. Mary pleaded desperately, but her son Tom refused to cover for her any longer, expressing his desire to succeed as a doctor independently. Disappointed by Mary's actions, Dr. Williams emphasized the importance of cherishing those around them, declaring that someone who couldn't uphold such values had no place in his hospital. Mary, realizing the gravity of the situation, turned to me for help, but I had reached my limit. "I've never been considered family by you," I asserted, refusing to associate with someone who only found their worth by looking down on others. Michelle, standing behind me, nodded in agreement, signaling her support. The wedding proceeded without Mary, and at Dr. Williams' behest, she was dismissed from the company for embezzlement of funds. During her divorce proceedings, her affair with a male nurse was exposed, leading to her downfall and destitution. Michelle apologized to me and promised to cut ties with Mary, reaffirming our bond as family. Despite the challenges, I continue to work hard every day, valuing family and being grateful to those who support me, including Dr. Williams. "Hello, is this Catherine? Can you come over for a bit?" It was a call from Michelle, my husband's younger sister. She sounded panicked, really on edge. Michelle's house was just a short walk away. "I've got it. I'll head over right now." When I arrived at Michelle's, she led me to a room that was buzzing with bees. "What the heck is this?" I opened a cardboard box and they came flying out. "We need to call Michelle's husband, Bob. He's at the coffee shop," I said and dialed him up. Talking in a room full of bees seemed like a bad idea, so Michelle and I stepped outside. The three of us gathered on the front porch. "So, Michelle, why do you have that box of bees in your house?" "I don't know. I just picked it up because it was left in front of my house." "That can't be. That box was sent to me from my daughter, Emily." "My name's Catherine Jones, a 65-year-old who works part-time at a local supermarket. One thing that hasn't changed since I was a kid is my love for stuffed animals and teddy bears. Growing up, we didn't have much money, so I couldn't often get stuffed animals or teddy bears. But now that I'm an adult, every time I travel or go out, I buy a teddy bear. Collecting them has become my joy." My husband, Larry Jones, who works at the town city hall, indulges this childlike hobby of mine. About a year ago, there was a teddy bear I desperately wanted. A limited edition online item, a collaboration between a popular brand and character. However, I had never shopped online and was about to give up on getting it. That's when I talked to Larry about it. "Leave the online shopping to me. We've started ordering things online at my workplace." "Really?" "Yes. So, I'll order it for you." "Oh, Larry, you're always so reliable. Thank you." With that, Larry promptly took out his laptop and showed me how to order, helping me through the process. Whenever I had troubles, Larry was always there to help. After that, I began to order everything online, from daily necessities and groceries to even teddy bears. Around December of that year, the supermarket I worked at entered its busiest season. Being experienced at the job, I started working almost every day. With that, I had limited time to pick up items I'd ordered online. Larry was even busier. Because of this, I decided to reconsider how I received my deliveries. Recently, I learned about a service that allows packages to be left by the front door even if no one is home. Since then, I've been primarily using this option for my deliveries. Just the other day, while I was on break at work, I received an email notification that my package had been delivered. This was nothing new. I'd received similar emails many times before. However, when I got home later, something seemed off. As I entered my house's gate and approached the door, I glanced around but couldn't find the package in its usual spot. Puzzled, I stepped back outside the gate. "Strange," I muttered, hearing the sound of crows in the sunset-colored sky. Larry hadn't returned from work yet, but he should be home soon with dinner to prepare. So I put the delivery issue aside and went inside to start cooking. As I focused on preparing dinner, I completely forgot about the missing package. The next few days were busy with house chores and work, and I didn't find the time to address the undelivered package. Then, one Sunday morning, while watching the news, Larry mentioned, "I'm in the mood for that omelette from the cafe." Larry was referring to a cafe owned by his sister Michelle and her husband Bob, who was the chef there. Since both of us had a rare day off, we decided on a whim to visit that cafe. "Would you like to go to that cafe?" Larry asked. "That sounds good. Let's go," I agreed. Although we call it our favorite spot, we only visit about once a month, usually when one of us expresses a desire to go. This is because Bob's omelettes are exceptional and one of Larry's favorite dishes. The cafe was just around the corner from our house. Under a cloudless blue sky, we walked towards it. Upon opening the cafe door, a metal doorbell jingled. "Welcome." "Hey, here you are. Thanks for coming in. Please take a seat at the counter," Michelle greeted us. We were guided to seats right in front of the kitchen counter. Well, both of you together. How are y'all doing?" Bob asked cheerfully. "As always, we're doing well," Larry replied. Even though there were only 4 people inside, the atmosphere felt bustling. I loved this cheerful vibe. This place is wonderful, I thought. "Bob, can we get 2 of the usual?" Larry asked. "Leave it to me," Bob replied. Bob skillfully cracked and whisked 4 eggs, poured them onto a pan, shaped them, and served them onto 2 plates. Lastly, he added some Italian parsley and passed them to Michelle. "Here you go, 2 servings of omelettes." "This is so delicious," Larry remarked. "I've had it many times, and I always crave it." After we finished eating, we were served coffee. "This dish is always so tasty, isn't it?" "Thank you," I said appreciatively. With that, Michelle sat across the counter facing me. That's when I noticed something. Michelle was wearing earrings that looked just like the ones I had ordered online. "Michelle, those earrings are so cute. Where did you get them?" I asked. Michelle smiled and replied, "Oh, really? Thank you. I got them online." "Yeah, online shopping sure is handy," I commented. "Yep, that's right. But when I'm running this cafe all the time, I hardly get back home during the day. I don't even have time to receive packages," Michelle explained. "Well, how about asking to have your packages left by the door?" I suggested to Michelle. Michelle looked a bit surprised and asked, "Is there such a thing?" At that point, I decided to explain the concept of the service in detail, recalling and sharing my own experiences with it at home. It's a good service, but sometimes there are mistakes. There have been a few instances where I haven't received my packages, even though I've paid for them. I really should call the courier company about it. But I just haven't had the time, I explained. Michelle responded empathetically. "Oh, I see. So that happens." I took this moment to check the status of my packages to be delivered. At the top of the list, the limited edition teddy bear I ordered was shown as preparing for shipment. I pointed it out to Michelle and said, "Look, Michelle, it says it hasn't been delivered yet." Then I pointed to the second item, which read delivered. It was a cosmetic product. "This should have already arrived at my place, but it hasn't." "That's strange," I remarked. "I hope you find it," Michelle said. At that moment, I looked over at Larry. He and his friends were having a different conversation, but soon joined in on our topic. "Well, guess we should just wait for it to be delivered someday," Larry said with a carefree smile. Larry's always been such a laid-back guy. He doesn't seem to take things too seriously. We continued our casual chat for a while before leaving the cafe. On the way home, I impulsively checked the delivery history on my smartphone. Nothing had changed. Most of the packages were marked as delivered. I wondered why it hadn't arrived and thought of various possible reasons. Maybe the local post office was holding it, or it got delivered to the wrong house. I was pretty sure no one in my neighborhood would just take a package left outside someone else's door. Right now, I was mostly concerned about whether that limited edition teddy bear would be delivered as promised. Whether or not I pursued the issue would depend on if that teddy bear arrived. That's what I was thinking to myself. 2 days had passed since I went to the coffee shop. Right after work, I eagerly checked my smartphone. At last, the delivery status of the limited edition teddy bear I had been longing for raid delivered. I quickly changed out of my work clothes and started to walk home faster. Once home, I looked for the package, but I couldn't find a box anywhere. I still hadn't figured out why the package hadn't arrived at my place, and I was getting pretty frustrated. Up until now, the only items that hadn't been delivered were cosmetics and condiments, so I wasn't in a rush. But this time was different. The teddy bear I had been eagerly waiting for, which was supposed to be part of my collection, hadn't arrived. I decided to get to the bottom of this. That evening, I talked to Larry. I didn't receive the teddy bear that was supposed to arrive today, I told him. That's bad. How many times has this happened now? Larry asked. Probably about 3 times. Something's not right, I replied. Oh, I'm gonna call the post office now. Let's do that, Larry suggested. I called the nearest post office, but as expected, there was no good news. The delivery man answered the call. I can't find the package you said you left at the door, he informed me. Really? I'm sure I left it right in front of your door. I thought maybe you still had it. What's going on? I asked. Well, there's a possibility someone stole it. You might want to file a police report, the delivery man suggested. Thanks. I'll think about it, I replied. Both of our spirits seemed to sink. For some reason, I felt sorry for the delivery man too. Even if I wanted to file a theft report, I didn't have any solid proof and was hesitant. That's when Larry said, let's ask Emily. She might know a solution. Emily is our daughter, who turned 40 this year. Now she's married and living in her husband's house, seemingly swamped with chores and work every day. Thinking it might be easier to discuss with my daughter Emily, I decided to ask her for advice. Hello, Emily. I've been having an issue for the past month. Packages I've been expecting haven't been arriving, I explained. Emily chuckled a bit and then came up with a wild suggestion. I'm going to send over a box of bees. If we leave it out for delivery, maybe we can catch the thief red-handed when they open it. What do you think? To be honest, the idea seemed way too bold, but it might be worth a try. Can you really do that? Don't worry about it. We have a huge swarm of bees back home, and this might just help us catch the culprit quickly, Emily reassured me. I was skeptical but hopeful, so I waited for the bee-filled package. A few days later, after work, I checked my phone and saw that the anticipated delivery had been made. When I got home, just like always, the package was nowhere to be found. I wasn't sure if this was a good or bad sign, but there was nothing I could do about it. Honestly, I was about to give up. At that moment, my smartphone buzzed. It was a call from Michelle. Hello, Catherine. Can you come over for a bit? Michelle's voice sounded urgent, almost panicky. Sure, I'll be right there. When I got to Michelle's house, she led me to her room, and to my surprise, the room was filled with bees flying everywhere. Oh my gosh, what happened? I exclaimed. When I opened this box, this is what I found inside, Michelle explained. First, I was shocked to find bees buzzing all around the room, and even more shocked to find out that Michelle was the culprit. I thought I should call Bob, who should be at the coffee shop, so I dialed his number, thinking it'd be difficult to discuss in a room full of bees. Michelle and I stepped outside. The 3 of us gathered at the front door. I then asked Michelle, So Michelle, any idea why there's a box of bees in this house? I have no clue. I just picked it up and opened the box that was outside, Michelle replied. That can't be right. That box was sent to me from my daughter, Emily, I pointed out. I told you I don't know, Michelle insisted. Michelle, did you steal it? I asked. No, I didn't. I swear. Michelle raised her voice. If you say you didn't, mind if I take a look inside? Maybe other stolen stuff might pop out, I suggested. No way. Let me check the room quickly, Michelle said, not letting me enter. I had no choice but to wait outside. As I was explaining to Bob about my missing packages possibly being stolen, We heard Michelle scream. She probably got stung by a bee in her panic. Michelle came out looking disheveled and said, "The room's a mess with those bees flying around, so I'd appreciate it if you'd head home for today." She indicated that she wouldn't be letting anyone in her room because of the bees. Then, an unfamiliar person approached us. It was a beekeeper named Oliver, a friend of Emily's who lived nearby. After a quick introduction, Oliver said, "Emily asked me to help with the bee situation. Is it okay if I handle it here?" "Yes, please. We'd appreciate it," I replied. While Michelle was flustered, Bob and I let Oliver inside the house. While waiting for the bees to be collected, we continued talking outside. "I guess we'll be able to check the room today," Bob remarked. "But I've only got stuff I bought." "There's no point in checking," Michelle suddenly asserted, clearly intending to insist that everything in there was hers. 30 minutes later, Oliver completed collecting 900 honeybees. Shocked by the sheer number of bees, the three of us entered the room. I took a quick look around and then started searching every corner. To my surprise, I found daily necessities like fabric softener and cosmetics I had ordered, scattered here and there. "So you've been taking all of these too, huh?" I confronted Michelle. "No, I told you," Michelle began, but I showed her the order history on my phone with those products listed. "You still better deny this," I asked. "Well, there's a chance we just bought the same things, right?" Michelle replied, slightly exasperated. I didn't give up. I continued searching for the teddy bear, and near the edge of the sofa, I found a familiar-looking teddy bear. "Is this teddy bear also one you bought?" I questioned Michelle. "Yes," Michelle replied. I knew this teddy bear was a limited edition, and each had its own serial number. So I checked the number for my teddy bear on my phone and compared it to the number on this one. Both had the same 5-digit number. "This teddy bear is mine." "See, it has the same number." I showed it to Michelle and Bob. "I didn't know modern stuffed animals could do that," Bob muttered, while Michelle just sat on the sofa and looked down silently. "So it was you who was stealing from her house every time?" I asked Michelle. "Yes." Michelle's voice grew heavy. "What did you take? You haven't been using them all this time, have you?" I pressed further. "I used a bit of the toner and some imported seasonings," Michelle confessed. "Why would you do something like that?" More than being angry about having things stolen, I wanted to know her motive. I was out of money. The amount I was spending exceeded what I had, that's all," Michelle explained. "But why spend so much? What did you spend it on?" I probed. "Well, Michelle's words faltered, and she seemed hesitant to talk about it. Suddenly, Bob moved quickly and picked up a piece of paper that had fallen under the couch. "Hey, what's this? Don't tell me you've been—" Bob trailed off, showing us a piece of paper with numbers and an amount. "I'm sorry, I got really into it," Michelle admitted. The paper Bob showed was a horse racing ticket. It turned out that Michelle had gotten heavily into horse racing and used the money she saved by using my stolen items on bets. Then Bob dropped another bombshell. "You didn't by chance take money from our cafe's earnings, did you?" "Just a little bit," Michelle confessed. I knew something was off with the profits. "How could you?" Bob was clearly upset. "It turned out she had embezzled tens of thousands of dollars from their cafe. I'm so sorry. I promise I won't do anything like this again. Please forgive me," Michelle cried loudly, apologizing. But for me, having my cherished teddy bear stolen even once was unforgivable. Her apologies did nothing to move my heart. Bob looked equally irritated. "Turns out she had embezzled tens of thousands of dollars from their cafe," I informed Bob. "Shall we meet in court?" Bob suggested. With solid evidence in hand, Bob and I decided to file a police report. Bob decided to get divorced from Michelle. After that, charges of theft concerning my belongings and embezzlement in the course of her duties were brought against Michelle. She was eventually arrested, and we were satisfied with the outcome. Bob's Cave hired part-time workers, and sales began to rise steadily. By the way, I was given the opportunity to become the part-time team leader there. Michelle got arrested, I heard, Larry mentioned. It's for the best. I'm better off without someone like her, I replied. Surrounded by hard-working folks makes me much happier now, Bob added. Yes, let's keep up the good work, I agreed. From then on, I started receiving packages left at my door. Of course, many new teddy bears joined my collection. Larry and I even went on trips to collect limited edition teddy bears from various places. And every day is blissful surrounded by all these teddy bears with Larry. What's the big deal with Costco's membership fee anyway? It's going to save us money. That was Sally, always trying to drag me along on her shopping adventures. She only thought about what was convenient for herself, and I had repeatedly turned down her requests. But she kept insisting it was no big deal, refusing to take no for an answer. Finally, she was ready to set a date, even though I hadn't agreed to go. So, when are we doing this? My husband chimed in, completely siding with Sally. I was shocked at his response. What are you thinking? It's Sally we're talking about. She's definitely going to make us pay again. Well, I plan on giving her a taste of her own medicine this time, James said, hinting at some kind of revenge plan if Sally behaved as selfishly as usual. I decided to go along with my husband's scheme. My name is Lily. My child started kindergarten this year, and I've been busy with his education and socializing with other parents in the neighborhood. Fortunately, most of the other moms are very kind, helping me with various things like advice about my child and parent-to-parent consultations. I also try to help out as much as I can, and I think I've managed to maintain good relationships with them, except for one mother, Sally. She always seems to need help from everyone around her, and despite referring to herself as a spoiled princess, hardly ever helps anyone in return. For instance, when the moms make plans to go out for a meal, she'd often appear out of nowhere and join in. I wouldn't mind, except she frequently asked for bites of other people's food and subtly suggested that someone else pay for her meal, claiming she didn't have much money. Other mothers who had experienced similar things felt the same way I did. Whenever I went shopping, I always drove my car, and most of the time, Sally would show up and persistently ask for a ride. I wouldn't mind if we were going to the same place, but Sally was undeniably pushy. I was in such a hurry to catch a ride with you that I forgot my wallet. What are we going to do? Go back for it? Nah, I don't want to inconvenience you. Maybe I can just pay you back later. Every time I took her shopping, it would end up like this. Excuses about forgetting her wallet or leaving her credit card at home, always trying to avoid taking out her own wallet. Sally never seemed to have any intention of paying, and despite promising to pay me back later, she almost never did. Even after I pressured her multiple times with the receipts, she kept evading, saying she didn't have any money now or to wait until her payday. When it comes to money, you're really strict, aren't you, Lily? She once said. I even involved her husband once, who was a decent man and would apologize and pay me back. Sally herself showed no remorse and seemed indifferent to the impact of her actions. While some might dismiss these small expenses, they added up significantly over the month. The stress of chasing her for repayment after each shopping trip was wearing me down. If only I could have refused her shopping requests from the start. But Sally knew how to manipulate me, often using our children as leverage. Our kids were close friends, and Sally would have them make plans to go shopping together before seeking my permission. It was hard for me to say no when she involved our children like that. I couldn't ask my son not to be friends with hers. Other mothers sympathized with my situation, but kept their distance from Sally. Hey, can you do the shopping instead? Why? That mom friend I mentioned before is so persistent. Well, you should just firmly decline, shouldn't you? Finally, I confided in my husband about it, hoping for support. But he didn't fully grasp Sally's character. He said kids are kids, and parents should stand firm. I was at a loss. Then one day, my husband came home looking exhausted. He explained that Sally had cornered him while he was waiting at a traffic light. Oh, you're Lily's husband. Perfect timing. Could you give me a ride to the station? She didn't seem to consider the possibility of him declining. When he refused, she became confrontational, repeatedly trying to open his passenger door. When he held firm, she shouted his name in the middle of the road, demanding his attention. "I can't believe she caused such a scene," I said. "I've been telling you, Sally is a handful. There's a limit." Afterward, she even asked him for the fare. Despite trying to shake her off, he found himself struggling in traffic. Dropping her off, he realized she was heading to the station without enough money for a ticket. My husband was drained and finally understood why I have been complaining. "What is she thinking, really?" he said. "That's why I wanted you to deal with her instead of me," I replied. "I bet she's just as insistent with you." He gave a helpless shrug, and we both felt troubled about what to do next. One day, Sally approached me with an idea. "Hey, Lily, I've been wanting to go to Costco. Want to go together? It's cheap and the value is great." "Wait, Sally, don't you go there often?" I replied cautiously, knowing she wasn't a member. With her sudden proposal, I gave a vague response. Despite not being a member herself, Sally seemed surprisingly knowledgeable about Costco and offered various recommendations. Our family had a Costco membership through my husband, and we occasionally used it to stock up. But that didn't mean I wanted to take Sally along on a shopping trip. I had my suspicions that she was after more than just a good deal. "Hey, let's go. You're a member, right, Lily?" "I'm not a member." "Oh, then your husband. That's fine too. And I want you to bring the car too." "How do you know that?" "I got a ride in your husband's car the other day. I saw Costco shopping bags," Sally explained, causing me to involuntarily frown. "You know you can't pay at Costco if you're not a member, right? So please take care of the cashier. I'll pay you back later," she continued. "You hardly ever pay me back when you say that, don't you? It's okay this time, right?" Despite having no intention of agreeing, Sally, as usual, turned to my child. "Can we go shopping together?" "Sure," my son replied enthusiastically. "So then the kids can be watched by my husband, right?" "I haven't said we're going yet." "Oh, come on, but it's fine, right? Costco has a membership fee, and it would really help me out." Unable to bear Sally's self-centeredness, I repeatedly refused her, even when I asked her not to use my child to make promises. She remained stubbornly indifferent, making any discussion impossible. Eventually, without even accepting her proposal, she began making plans as if we were definitely going. "What are you talking about?" I exclaimed when my husband arrived to pick me up. "Lily's husband. We were just making a promise to go to Costco together," Sally explained eagerly. "Oh, that's fine. When shall we do it?" My husband responded, surprising me. Sally happily rushed to my husband and quickly secured a promise to go to Costco the following weekend. After Sally left, I couldn't help but complain to my husband. "Hey, what are you thinking? That's Sally we're talking about." "I know, but she said she'd bring her own money, didn't she?" "That's definitely a lie. We're bound to get stuck with the bill." At that time, I planned to give her a taste of her own medicine. James replied confidently, revealing his strategy to handle Sally's actions. Despite my concerns, I couldn't help but laugh when I heard his plan. While it seemed like an outrageous payback, it only applied if Sally behaved as brazenly as usual. Additionally, if this occasion led Sally to avoid getting involved with us, it might turn out to be a good thing, so I decided to go along with my husband's plan. Finally, the day to go to Costco arrived. Sally, in a good mood from the morning, naturally got into our car, asking if she had forgotten anything. "Do you have your wallet? It'd be a problem if you forgot it." "Aren't you the one who often forgets?" No worries, Sally replied casually, irritating me. James amiably responded to her, which was unusual for him. Normally, I would have wanted to check by having her take out her wallet, but considering my husband's plan, I held back. Sally seemed well aware of Costco's membership system, probably knowing in advance that only those with a membership card could make payments. If she shopped there, inevitably James would have to pay. Then she could push the payment onto us as usual. If she claimed she forgot her wallet, she wouldn't have to pay anything, which was probably what she was thinking. Sally, in high spirits, arrived at the store and swiftly started filling the cart with goods. "Wow, such a wide selection. It's hard to choose," she exclaimed happily, tossing items into her cart as she looked around the store. When I suggested we keep our carts separate to avoid confusion with our goods, she adjusted her cart and continued loading it without any hesitation. James surreptitiously whispered in my ear, knowing how Sally was mindlessly adding items to her cart without even looking at the price tags. I couldn't help but laugh. It seemed Sally, as usual, wasn't considering that she'd be the one paying, and I decided to go along with James' plan. As we queued up at the farthest checkout line, observing the crowded checkout area, Sally opened her bag. I watched her closely, and as I had predicted, she started rummaging through her small bag and began to look puzzled. "Oh, I'm sorry. It seems I've forgotten my wallet. You said it was okay in the car, didn't you? I'm sorry. Okay, can I pay you back some other time?" Sally said, realizing her predicament. Sally's cart had significantly more items than ours. It seemed like she intended to purchase $200 to $300 worth of goods, but she had shown no signs of concern about the amount of money in her wallet. Considering she didn't say anything when we got home today, she probably has absolutely no intention of contributing any money. James and I exchanged glances. "Oh, right. Sorry. I need to take this call from my folks," I said abruptly, leaving my cart with James and stepping out of the line. I hid behind nearby shelves, secretly observing their interactions. Sally seemed to be chatting with James without a care in the world. "It's a shame you bought so much but forgot your wallet. It's really a bummer, but I'm lucky to have a friend who can cover for me," Sally remarked nonchalantly. James responded. "Oh, I forgot to buy something. Can you hold my place in line while I go get it?" "Ew, fine, but hurry back, okay?" James agreed reluctantly, also leaving the line. It was a busy Sunday morning, one of the busiest times at Costco. As soon as Sally turned to face the cashier, she was lost in the crowd. Now, what would she do with a cart that full? She couldn't really claim she's not buying anything, could she? James and I exchanged glances and shared a wry smile hidden behind the store shelves. We walked around the back of the shelves and queued up at the furthest checkout line on the opposite side. From there, we watched Sally, who seemed to be waiting for us while slowly giving up her place in line to those behind her. Given the crowded Sunday morning with many people planning to grab lunch here as well, she wouldn't be able to spot us in line far away. We paid for our goods and left the store first. We got into the car and waited for a while. When I checked my phone to reveal the prank, there was a message from Sally. "Hey, still not back? Come on, don't keep me waiting like this." I can't believe she could stand in line that long without her wallet. Why don't we just tell her the truth and ask her to come back to the car? Sounds good to me. Apparently, she was still waiting diligently, which made us both chuckle. I wondered what she was planning to do after putting all that stuff into the cart, and then realizing that we didn't have enough money to pay for it all. With that thought, we told her we already finished paying and went back to the car. As expected, an outraged call came in from Sally. "Hey, wait a minute. What are you thinking? I'm not done shopping yet. If you don't have your wallet, you can't shop in the first place. Come on back now. Don't make it impossible for me. Stop joking around. Come back quickly and pay for this." "We're not paying. Do you have any idea how much money you've made us spend until now?" I responded firmly. This argument continued for a while, and no matter what we said, Sally insisted that since I brought her, I should pay. In the end, she even threatened not to go back home unless I paid, which made my husband James even more fed up. "Well, if she doesn't want to come back, there's nothing we can do," James said, starting the car. When I asked how Sally would get home, James simply replied, "She'll be fine. I bet she'll just force someone to give her a ride if it comes down to it." With a laugh, clearly still holding a grudge about the incident when Sally forced him to drive her to the station. I kept communicating with Sally, even telling her that we would leave her behind if she didn't come back, but she wouldn't listen. Maybe it was harsh to leave her behind, but with the way things were going, I didn't know what else to do. Knowing her, she'd figure something out, I thought as we left the store. The next day, Sally managed to get home by herself, taking the bus. My husband laughed about how she did have a wallet after all, which was met with a furious Sally storming into our house. "You left me stranded at the store. That was so mean." "Well, it's your fault for going shopping without bringing any money," I retorted. "So, you just left me. That's the worst. You could have just paid for me. Do you even realize how much you've been mooching off us? You're always like this, Lily. You're always so stingy." She brought up her self-centered arguments, yelling endlessly about how she was unhappy that I didn't spend my money. She even demanded compensation for her emotional distress, making a scene at the entrance of our house. "What's going on here with all the shouting?" Catherine, passing by, interrupted. "Oh, Catherine, listen to this," Sally said with a smirk upon seeing her. "Lily promised to take me shopping, and then she left me." "Oh, you mean you pressured her into making a promise, right?" Catherine responded skeptically. No, it's not like that. Lily said she'd take me." There's no way she'd invite someone who's always forgetting her wallet and relying on others to pay for her. "So you threw a tantrum trying to get her to pay for you again, and then she left you. That's what you get." Catherine pointed out the truth of the matter, contrary to the story Sally was trying to spread. Sally was left speechless. I had anticipated that Sally might spread some rumors, so I had already discussed yesterday's events with Catherine under the pretense of consultation. On the flip side, Sally, who was lectured by Catherine, left with a bright red face. Catherine, while encouraging me and acknowledging it was a tough situation, seemed a little amused. I'm sure she'll be telling others about what Sally has done from here on out. After that, Sally couldn't even correct the truth, and thanks to Catherine, her misdeeds quickly spread throughout the neighborhood. Sally tried to make some allies, but she seemed to be spreading unnecessary rumors herself, and it seemed like no one would help her. On the contrary, many people told her she got what she deserved and started to distance themselves from her even more. "All of this is your fault," Sally kept blaming me as usual. After a while, it seems she was severely scolded by her husband, and now she starts to run away as soon as she sees me. Since the people who were fed up with Sally's actions started to praise me for doing a good job, I'd like to think this issue is settled. Because of Sally's constant annoyance, I was distanced from many people, but now this incident has brought us closer. We started going shopping together, but of course, we each pay for our own things and have built a balanced relationship of give and take. "Did the old lady die yet?" I glared at the guy, feeling angry. He was my ex-husband who left his blind mother to run away with his mistress. It was hard to believe he was raised by my kind mother-in-law. His words made me even angrier. "You must have had it tough, huh? Now you're free to do whatever you want, though there's only so much an old lady like you can do?" He laughed rudely. I hid my anger behind a smile and replied, "Yeah, I just inherited $3 million, so I'm going to enjoy my freedom from now on." His smirk disappeared as he realized I wasn't the person he thought I was. "My name is Grace. I'm 63 now. I married young and moved in with my in-laws. Despite their kindness, my husband disappointed me. I divorced him 10 years ago when I was 53. Our kids were teenagers then, and it was tough supporting them and my blind mother-in-law. My ex-husband, John, and I met at work when I was 18. He was older and seemed reliable. We got married despite my parents' objections. I quit my job to take care of his parents and manage the household while he worked late. One day, I bumped into a former colleague of my husband's at the grocery store. Naturally, we started chatting about my husband and me. The colleague said, "Your husband, Mr. Young, always leaves work early because he's worried about you, Grace. He's such a wonderful husband." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My husband always came home late, never early. There must have been some mistake, but in the moment, all I could do was give a nervous smile and agree, yes, that's true. When I got home, I brought it up with my husband. I had intended to subtly mention it, saying something like, "You've been coming home late recently. Can't you come home a little earlier? I feel bad for your father. It seems a little embarrassing for him to be cared for by a woman. Can't you at least help him bathe?" But before I could finish, my husband snapped at me. "What? I'm working, you know. I'm not just goofing off. Tell my dad not to be so demanding." But his father wasn't asking for anything. It was just how I felt. My husband seemed unwilling to help with caregiving, and his defensiveness bothered me. I had a sinking feeling that I was right about him, but I was too scared to confront him. I had married against my parents' wishes, so I didn't have a home to return to. Plus, I worried about my in-laws' well-being. In the end, I chose to carry on as usual. Then one day, I thought about getting an electric wheelchair for my father-in-law. Currently, he managed with a cane and a manual wheelchair, but an electric one would allow him to take short strolls. If I put my blind mother-in-law in the wheelchair and pushed her, we could go on longer walks. I talked to my husband about it, expecting him to agree, but his response was lukewarm. "Huh, do we really need it?" he grimaced. "I'm barely making ends meet with my income. Do we really need to spend money on that?" We weren't wealthy, but if the wheelchair could bring even a little joy to my in-laws, I didn't see it as a waste of money. So, I suggested to John that maybe we could take out a loan to buy the electric wheelchair for my father-in-law. He seemed somewhat agreeable, warning me not to cause any trouble. I couldn't tell my in-laws exactly what he said, but I gave them a positive message, indicating we could borrow from the bank. My father-in-law was thrilled, and we went to the bank together to set up the loan and purchase the wheelchair. They were overjoyed with it. However, not long after, my father-in-law passed away. My mother-in-law and I were devastated, but John complained, saying he left us with debt. He seemed to have forgotten the happiness the wheelchair brought them. Now it was just my mother-in-law and me living together. She could manage some things herself despite being blind, so my caregiving duties lessened. John suggested we have children, and despite my doubts about him, we eventually had two. But even after the kids were born, he didn't change much. My days were consumed with chores and childcare, but my mother-in-law's happiness kept me going. Despite all this, John continued to come home late, even on his supposed days off. His lack of affection towards my mother-in-law and the children became more apparent. One Saturday, he planned to work instead of taking my mother-in-law to her medical checkup, which we had arranged beforehand. He argued that it was my job as a housewife to take care of her. His words hurt me deeply. I realized then that he only married me because he thought I would take care of his parents. I was filled with regret for marrying him. When I confronted him, he left and never returned. A few days later, he sent a letter divorcing me and stating he wanted nothing to do with the debt or us. Exhausted and hurt, I decided to inform my children and mother-in-law about the situation before moving forward with the divorce. My mother-in-law was the most shocked when she heard about the divorce. She kept repeating how sorry she was while crying. "You've made me happy, Grace, along with my grandkids Mary and Jack. But if you're getting divorced, then I'm like a stranger. I'll live on my own. It'll take time, but I will move out," she said. I replied firmly, holding her hand, "You're no different from my real mother, and you're the only grandmother for my children. We don't need to worry about our future. We're still a family even after the divorce. Let's live together as we have been." My mother-in-law thanked me through her tears. However, I couldn't help but worry. Without my husband, even for all his flaws, the financial situation became dire. I searched desperately for a job, but no one would hire me after being a housewife for so long. Mary and Jack offered to work, but my mother-in-law intervened, suggesting I focus on continuing education without worrying about work. We were puzzled by her suggestion, but life continued as usual, even feeling more comfortable than before. I filed for divorce through my lawyer, with no desire to see my ex-husband again. My mother-in-law wanted to report him missing, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Eventually, she passed away, joining my father-in-law. My ex-husband, her son, never appeared again despite her efforts to find him. Now, unexpectedly, my ex-husband stands before me while I'm out shopping. He tries to engage in conversation, accompanied by a much younger woman. His disrespectful remarks about my deceased mother-in-law infuriate me. But I hold back my anger. Instead, I calmly inform him of my inheritance and the smooth process it was without him around. His reaction is shock and disbelief. As I turn to leave, he desperately calls out to me, but I walk away, leaving him behind, pale and stunned. I couldn't resist feeling a sense of satisfaction. I had no intention of telling him anything, but perhaps he should know how foolish he's been. You're kidding me, I'm her son, right? I didn't hear about any inheritance. I should have a right to a share too, he protested. His words only made me smirk. Well, yes, but you were gone. Did you know that after 7 years of disappearance, you were considered legally dead? So your mother-in-law's inheritance was willed to me, your eldest son and eldest daughter. You have no role in this anymore, I explained. My ex-husband looked dumbfounded, and I almost burst out laughing. I understood why my mother-in-law had told me to file a missing persons report after she had passed. A lawyer appeared, explaining everything to me. My mother-in-law's family owned land, and despite severing ties, she had the right to inherit. She had never disclosed it, and we were able to live without any worries thanks to her inheritance. Once I had asked her how she managed her money, and she replied, "I'm using it as I please to live a happy life with my family." Though it wasn't a pension, she spent it freely, and we gratefully accepted her offer. The inheritance she received was substantial, far more than she could ever use in her lifetime. However, the existence of my husband posed a problem. If things remained the same, he would inherit everything. But during her consultation with a lawyer, my husband disappeared. She believed he had finally cut ties with us. She was sad to part from us, but planned to move into a nursing home with assisted living, using up almost all of her inheritance to avoid leaving any troubles behind. My eldest son, eldest daughter, and I all reassured her that we saw her as a family member and wanted to continue living as we had been. It was a joyous moment for my mother-in-law. Wanting to pass on her inheritance to us, she followed her attorney's advice and filed a missing person report for my husband. Following the law, after 7 years, he was legally treated as if he had passed away. When my mother-in-law passed away 1 year later, her inheritance was passed on through lineage to her oldest son and daughter, in place of my husband. Though I had no rights to inheritance, she left a will including me as well, ensuring we received her loving legacy. Upon hearing my words, my ex-husband was left in shock, mouth agape. It served him right. He then contacted me, claiming he should have a share in the inheritance. I couldn't believe how audacious he was. There's no inheritance for someone who's legally dead. I've told him many times, but he's not convinced and insists on discussing it further. I consulted an attorney. For my ex-husband to inherit anything, there would have to be various procedures, such as retracting the missing person report. I had no intention of giving him a single penny. If he wanted to inherit, he would also have to pay inheritance tax. When I told him this, he fell silent. Our children were present during our discussion. He claimed he couldn't take off work or handle the procedures, insisting we should pay his share. I was disgusted by his defiance. Apparently, he's now working a day-to-day job and struggling financially. He had left his previous job due to chronic absences and owed a debt to a previous lover. Even when he explained this, I couldn't understand him. Then, I asked about the woman he was with the other day. He arrogantly replied that she's the one he's been looking for. But they're not married, only together for half a year. My eldest son couldn't help but laugh, while my oldest daughter and I were speechless. When I asked about the woman he left with after our divorce, he said she couldn't make him happy and left nonchalantly. It seems like my ex-husband hasn't quite realized that he's been the one getting dumped all this time. He's been flitting from one woman to another, trying to cling to his youth. "You're an old man. Stop acting like you're still young," I advised him, but it fell on deaf ears. He insisted that his current girlfriend was his destined woman, and I knew there was no use arguing with him. Thanks to our encounter, I found out where he lives now. Apparently, he's in an apartment in the next town over, under his girlfriend's name. My oldest son, using the money my mother-in-law gave us, bought the whole building and became the landlord. He didn't do it to help his father. Instead, he's strict about rent collection, unlike the previous landlord. It's like his way of saying, "You've caused enough trouble. Now it's time to face the consequences." My ex-husband eventually came begging for forgiveness, admitting he failed as a parent and a spouse. But I couldn't just forgive and forget. He asked if Jack could cut him some slack on the rent, but I reminded him that if he had been a better father, he wouldn't be in this situation. My words left him speechless, and he left without a word. In the end, he got kicked out of his apartment due to rent arrears and ended up in a rundown place with drafty rooms. It seems he's still struggling day by day, taking whatever odd jobs he can find. He even broke up with the woman he was with, probably because he couldn't support her anymore. Our family, on the other hand, is thriving, thanks to my mother-in-law's legacy. We've invested wisely in real estate and stocks, ensuring a steady income. We have time for leisure activities like traveling, and my eldest daughter is getting married to a kind and caring man. Despite the hardships we faced, we've overcome them and found happiness in the present.